A decorated Navy SEAL stands witness in a Birmingham courtroom. A cop kicks him to the ground. The judge watches. No one moves. Blood drips from his lip as Eric Kane rises and speaks 6 words that will shatter a city. "You don't know who I am." What happens next isn't just justice, it's a reckoning. Stay with me until the end of this story and drop a comment with your city name so I can see how far this truth travels. Because what started with one kick ended an empire. The fluorescent lights in courtroom 7B hummed like dying insects, casting a sickly yellow glow across the oak-paneled walls of Birmingham's Jefferson County Courthouse. It was 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in late September, and the air conditioning had been broken for 3 days straight. The heat made everything slower, heavier, like the whole room was drowning in molasses. Eric Kane stood in the witness box, his posture military perfect, despite the sweat gathering at his collar. At 34, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who'd survived things most people couldn't imagine. His Navy SEAL trident pin, the only concession to his service he'd allowed himself today, caught the light as he breathed. He was here as a witness to a traffic stop gone wrong, nothing more. A formality, really. He'd seen Officer Darren Cole pull over Marcus Webb 3 months ago, watched the whole thing from his car while waiting at a red light. Watched Cole's hand drift to his weapon for no reason. Watched Marcus, a 17-year-old kid on his way home from debate practice, get yanked from his vehicle and slammed against the hood hard enough to dent it. Eric had given his statement that night. Professional, factual, by the book. He never expected to see the inside of this courtroom. "Mr. Kane." The prosecutor, a tired-looking woman named Sarah Chen, adjusted her glasses and checked her notes. "Can you describe what you observed on the evening of June 14th at the intersection of 5th Avenue and 22nd Street? "Yes, ma'am." Eric's voice was steady, measured. "I was stopped at the red light heading northbound. I observed Officer Cole's patrol vehicle initiate a traffic stop on a blue Honda Civic in the lane adjacent to mine." "And what happened next?" "The driver complied immediately. He pulled over, turned off his engine, placed both hands on the steering wheel. Everything by the book." Eric paused, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. Officer Cole approached the vehicle with his hand on his sidearm. The driver, Marcus Webb, remained calm, kept his hands visible. Officer Cole ordered him out of the vehicle. "Did Marcus Webb resist?" "No, ma'am, not at all." In the gallery, Eric could see Marcus's mother, Diane Webb, clutching a tissue so tightly her knuckles had gone white. She'd aged a decade in 3 months. Her son sat beside her, a medical boot still on his left foot from where it had been broken that night. What happened when Marcus exited the vehicle? Eric's eyes shifted almost imperceptibly to the defense table where Officer Darren Cole sat in his dress uniform, his attorney whispering something in his ear. Cole was a thick-set man in his early 40s with a face that seemed permanently set in a sneer. He'd been with Birmingham PD for 16 years. 16 years of complaint files that somehow always disappeared. 16 years of misunderstandings and miscommunications. Officer Cole grabbed Marcus by the shoulder and, "Objection." Cole's attorney, a sharp-dressed man named Mitchell Frazier, stood abruptly. "The witness is characterizing my client's actions in a prejudicial manner." Officer Cole executed a standard compliance hold. Judge Patricia Holloway, a severe woman in her 60s who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else, barely glanced up. "Overruled. The witness may describe what he observed. Continue, Mr. Kane." Eric nodded. Officer Cole grabbed Marcus Webb with sufficient force to spin him around, then slammed him face first against the hood of the vehicle. "I heard the impact from 30 feet away. Marcus's nose broke on contact. I saw the blood immediately. He was then—" "Your Honor," Frazier's voice rose. "This is clearly biased testimony from someone with an agenda against law enforcement. Mr. Frazier, sit down, or I'll hold you in contempt." Judge Holloway's tone was ice. "Mr. Kane is a decorated naval officer. His credibility isn't in question here." But that's when everything changed. Officer Darren Cole stood up, not to confer with his attorney. not to request a recess. He simply stood his chair scraping against the floor with a sound like fingernails on a chalkboard and walked directly toward the witness stand. Officer Cole, return to your seat immediately. Judge Holloway's gavel came down once sharp as a gunshot. Cole didn't stop. Bailiff. The judge's voice carried real alarm now. Eric watched Cole approach with the kind of hyper-focused calm that came from a decade of combat training. He could see it in Cole's eyes, that particular brand of rage that came from a man used to power, used to control, suddenly finding himself on the wrong side of accountability. You think you can come in here? Cole's voice was low, dangerous, as he closed the distance between them. And tell lies about me. You think that uniform means something? The bailiff. A younger officer named Jenkins was moving now, but not fast enough. Never fast enough. Officer Cole, this is your final warning. Judge Holloway stood her hand reaching for something under her bench, a panic button maybe. Eric remained perfectly still in the witness box, his training kicking in. Assess. Calculate. Prepare. Cole was 3 feet away now. 2 feet. Close enough that Eric could smell the coffee on his breath, see the broken blood vessels in his eyes. Officer Cole! Frazier was shouting now, finally realizing his client was about to commit career suicide in front of a packed courtroom. That's when Darren Cole kicked him. It wasn't a wild swing or a clumsy shove. It was deliberate, calculated, a boot to Eric's midsection, delivered with the full force of a man who'd done this before and never faced consequences. The kind of kick designed to humiliate, to establish dominance. The impact drove Eric backward into the witness box railing. He felt something crack, maybe a rib, maybe the wood behind him. Pain exploded across his torso, white-hot and immediate. The courtroom erupted. Diane Webb screamed. Marcus lunged forward, but his mother held him back. Frazier was yelling something about medication and stress. Sarah Chen had her phone out, already calling for security. Judge Holloway's gavel came down again and again, the sound lost in the chaos. Eric tasted copper. He'd bitten the inside of his cheek on impact, and blood was pooling in his mouth. His vision swam for a second, then cleared with the sharp focus of adrenaline. Bailey Jenkins finally reached Cole, grabbing him by the arm. Sir, you need to step back right now. Get your hands off me. Cole wrenched free, his eyes still locked on Eric. This is police harassment. This is a setup. The courtroom doors burst open. 2 more officers rushed in, younger, uncertain about what to do when the threat was one of their own. And through it all, Eric Kane rose, slowly, deliberately. He wiped the blood from his lip with the back of his hand, his eyes never leaving Darren Cole's face. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Even the judge had gone silent, her gavel suspended mid-air. Eric stepped down from the witness box, moving with the kind of controlled precision that made everyone in the room take an involuntary step back. He wasn't aggressive, he wasn't threatening. He was simply inevitable. He stopped 3 feet from Cole, who was now being restrained by 2 officers, and spoke 6 words that would echo through Birmingham for months to come. You don't know who I am. The words were quiet, calm, but they carried the weight of a promise. I know exactly what you are. Cole spit back, still struggling against the officers holding him. You're all the same, coming in here with your... That's enough. Judge Holloway's voice cracked like thunder. Officer Cole, you are in contempt of court. Bailiff, remove him immediately. And someone call an ambulance for Mr. Kane. I don't need an ambulance, Eric said, still looking at Cole. I'm fine. Mr. Kane, you're bleeding. I said I'm fine, Your Honor. Eric finally turned to face the judge, and something in his expression made her pause. I'd like to finish my testimony if possible. The courtroom had gone utterly silent now. Even Cole had stopped struggling, staring at Eric like he was seeing him for the first time. Judge Holloway studied Eric for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Very well. Officer Cole, you are remanded to custody pending a separate hearing. This court will take a 15-minute recess to allow Mr. Kane to compose himself. We reconvene at 3:15. The gavel came down with finality. As the officers dragged Cole toward the side door, he twisted back one more time. "This isn't over. I know people. You think you can just—" The door slammed shut, cutting him off mid-threat. The hallway outside Courtroom 7B was a circus of chaos and whispered conversations. News of what happened had spread through the courthouse like wildfire. Attorneys poked their heads out of other courtrooms. Court reporters huddled in corners, their fingers flying across phone screens. Eric sat on a bench outside the restroom, pressing a damp paper towel to his lip. Sarah Chen crouched in front of him, her face a mixture of professional concern and barely contained fury. "Eric, Mr. Kane, we need to document your injuries. We need to file charges. What just happened in there was assault, battery, in front of a sitting judge, for God's sake." "I know what it was." Eric's voice was quiet. "Then you understand, we have the strongest possible case against Ms. Chen." Eric looked at her directly. How many complaints has Darren Cole had filed against him in his 16 years on the force? Sarah hesitated. That's not relevant to how many. She sighed. Officially 7. Unofficially, I've heard rumors of at least 20 more that never made it into the system. And how many resulted in disciplinary action? None. The word came out bitter. Internal affairs cleared him every time. Insufficient evidence, conflicting statements, the usual. Eric nodded slowly. So what makes you think this time will be different? Because this time there were 40 witnesses. Because this time he assaulted a decorated Navy SEAL in open court. Because... Sarah stopped seeing something in Eric's expression. You don't think it will be different, do you? Before Eric could answer, a young man approached them. He was maybe 19-20 at most, wearing a college hoodie and carrying a backpack covered in activist stickers. His hands were shaking. Excuse me, the kid's voice cracked slightly. Were you just in courtroom 7B? Who's asking? Sarah stepped protectively in front of Eric. My name's Liam Foster. I was in the gallery. I saw everything. He fumbled with his backpack, pulling out a phone. I recorded it. Eric stood slowly, ignoring the spike of pain in his ribs. You recorded the assault. I record everything in courtrooms. Liam's words came faster now, like he'd been holding them in too long. I'm a journalism student at UAB. I've been following Marcus Webb's case since it started. I knew something was going to happen. Cole has a reputation. Everyone knows it. But nobody ever... He swallowed hard. I got the whole thing. From the moment he stood up to the moment they dragged him out. Sarah reached for the phone. Mr. Foster, that recording is evidence. We'll need you to... Wait. Eric held up a hand. Liam, why did you really record this? Why this case? The kid's jaw tightened. Because 3 years ago, my brother was pulled over by Darren Cole. Trevor was 22. He had a broken taillight. That's it. Just a broken taillight. Liam's eyes filled with tears he was trying hard to hold back. Cole said Trevor matched a description. Said he was acting suspicious. My brother had anxiety, so yeah, he was nervous when a cop pulled him over. Cole took that as resistance. What happened? Eric asked quietly. Trevor spent 6 hours in a holding cell. Cole's report said he'd been combative, tried to flee. All lies. But by the time they let him go, Trevor had bruises all over his arms, a concussion, and he'd lost his job because he didn't show up for his shift. He was too ashamed to press charges. Thought nobody would believe him. Liam's voice dropped to a whisper. He killed himself 4 months later. Drove his car into a tree on Highway 280. The hallway seemed to contract around them. Sarah had gone pale. I'm sorry, Eric said, and meant it. I don't want sorry. Liam's voice hardened with surprising steel. I want people to see. I want them to know what Cole is, what he's always been. He looked down at his phone. I already uploaded it to 3 different cloud services. They can't delete it. They can't make it disappear like they did with Trevor's complaint. Eric studied the young man for a long moment. There was something familiar in Liam's eyes, that particular kind of pain, that came from watching the system fail someone you loved. "Send me the video," Eric said. "Eric." Sarah started to protest. "Send it to me," Eric repeated, pulling out his own phone. "And then I want you to go home, Liam. Don't talk to any reporters. Don't post about this online. Not yet." "But people need to." "They will, but not yet." Eric's voice carried absolute certainty. "Trust me on this. If we do this right, Cole won't be able to slip away this time. But if we rush it, if we give them time to build a narrative to spin this into something, it's not—" He let the sentence hang. Liam nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. "You're going to do something." "I'm going to finish my testimony," Eric said. "And then we're going to make sure that video matters." As Liam transferred the file, footsteps echoed down the hallway. A tall black woman in a Birmingham PD uniform approached, her expression carefully neutral. She was older than Cole, maybe late 40s, with sergeant's stripes on her sleeve and eyes that had seen too much. "Mr. Kane." She stopped a respectful distance away. "I'm Sergeant Naomi Price. I need to take your statement about the incident." Sarah stepped forward immediately. "Sergeant, my client has already given extensive testimony in court. The assault happened in front of 40 witnesses and a sitting judge. Surely, this is procedure, counselor." Naomi's voice was professional, but Eric caught something else underneath, a weariness maybe, or resignation. "Mr. Kane, I understand you're injured. We can do this later if you need medical attention." "I'm fine." Eric met her eyes directly. "But I have a question first, Sergeant Price. How long have you worked with Officer Cole?" Naomi's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. "That's not relevant to—" "How long?" A pause. 12 years. "And in those 12 years, how many times have you filed reports about his conduct?" The hallway had gone very quiet. Sarah and Liam were both watching Naomi with sudden intensity. "Mr. Kane, I'm here to take your statement, not to—" "How many—" Eric's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. Naomi looked at him for a long moment. Behind her carefully maintained professional mask, Eric could see a war being fought. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. 17. The number hung in the air like smoke. 17 reports, Eric repeated. "And what happened to them? Mr. Kane, what happened to them?" "Sergeant?" Naomi's jaw clenched. "They were reviewed by internal affairs and found to be unsubstantiated." "All 17. All 17. Eric nodded slowly. "And the notebook you keep in your locker, the one with the blue cover, is that where you write the things that don't make it into official reports?" Naomi's carefully maintained composure cracked. Her eyes widened, genuine shock breaking through. "How could you possibly—" "Because I've seen it before." Eric's voice was gentle now. Different city, different department, same story. Good cops trying to do the right thing in a system designed to protect the wrong ones. You keep a personal record because you know the official ones disappear. For a moment, Eric thought Naomi might walk away, might retreat back behind that professional mask and pretend this conversation never happened. But instead, something seemed to break inside her. Her shoulders sagged almost imperceptibly. "The blue notebook has 43 entries," she said quietly. 14 different officers. Cole's name appears in 27 of them. She looked directly at Eric. "And if anyone in my department finds out, I told you that my career is over." "Then we'll make sure it counts," Eric said. Before Naomi could respond, the courtroom doors opened. Judge Holloway's clerk, a efficient-looking woman in her 30s, stepped out. "Court is reconvening. Mr. Kane, the judge, is ready for you to complete your testimony." Eric stood wincing slightly as his bruised ribs protested. He looked at the 3 people surrounding him, a prosecutor who wanted justice, a student who wanted truth, and a cop who wanted change. "Ms. Chen, I'll finish my testimony. Liam, keep that video safe. Sergeant Price." He paused. Thank you for your honesty. Naomi met his eyes. What are you planning to do? What I was trained to do, Eric said simply. Complete the mission. The courtroom felt different when Eric returned to the witness stand. The gallery was more crowded now word had spread, and reporters had materialized like vultures sensing blood. Eric recognized faces from the local news, the Birmingham Post-Herald, even what looked like a national correspondent he'd seen on CNN. Judge Holloway waited until the room settled before speaking. Mr. Kane, are you certain you wish to continue? Given what occurred, the court would understand if... I'm ready, Your Honor. The judge nodded, though her expression remained concerned. Very well. Ms. Chen, you may resume your examination. Sarah Chen stood, her notes trembling slightly in her hands. Mr. Kane, before we were interrupted, you were describing the events of June 14th, specifically the moment Officer Cole initiated contact with Marcus Webb. Can you continue from there? Eric took a breath, feeling the ache in his ribs, tasting copper still lingering in his mouth. But his voice when he spoke was steady clear. After Officer Cole slammed Marcus against the hood of the vehicle, Marcus remained compliant. His hands were visible. He wasn't resisting. But Cole put him in handcuffs with enough force that I could see bruising form immediately on Marcus's wrists. In the gallery, Diane Webb was crying silently. What happened next? Cole called for backup. 2 additional units arrived within 5 minutes. During that time, Cole searched Marcus's vehicle without consent. Objection. Frazier was on his feet, though his heart clearly wasn't in it anymore. Not after his client had just committed assault in open court. Officer Cole had probable cause to sustained. Judge Holloway's tone was icy. Though I'd advise you to choose your battles more carefully at this point, counselor. Eric continued. Officer Cole removed Marcus's backpack from the vehicle. It contained textbooks, a laptop, and a debate trophy. Cole threw the backpack on the ground, scattering its contents across the street. One of the responding officers, I later learned his name was Officer Chen. No relation, appeared uncomfortable with what was happening. He tried to speak to Cole privately, but Cole waved him off. Did Officer Cole find anything illegal in Mr. Webb's vehicle? No, ma'am. Did he issue a citation for the supposed traffic violation that initiated the stop? No, ma'am. Then what happened? Eric paused, his eyes moving to Marcus in the gallery. The kid was watching him with an expression of raw gratitude mixed with remembered terror. Cole pulled Marcus away from the other officers. I could see them talking, but I couldn't hear the conversation. Marcus's hands were still cuffed behind his back. He appeared to be crying. Cole's body language was aggressive, leaning in close, using his size to intimidate. After approximately 2 minutes, Cole stepped back and ordered one of the other officers to uncuff Marcus. Officer Cole released him. Not exactly. Eric's voice hardened slightly. Cole told Marcus, quote, I could make your life very difficult, boy. Or you could remember that this was just a friendly conversation. Your choice. End quote. The courtroom stirred. Someone in the gallery gasped. How could you hear that, if you said you couldn't hear their earlier conversation? Because by that point, I had exited my vehicle and approached the scene. Frazier shot to his feet. Your Honor, the witness has now admitted to interfering with a lawful... I identified myself as a witness and provided my contact information to Officer Chen. Eric cut in calmly. I broke no laws and impeded no lawful police action. Judge Holloway waved Frazier back down. Continue, Mr. Kane. When I approached Cole, became immediately defensive. He asked what I was doing there, why I was getting involved. I explained that I had observed the entire interaction and wanted to provide a witness statement. Cole told me that wouldn't be necessary, said everything had been resolved. But you provided a statement anyway. Yes, ma'am, to Officer Chen. I gave him my full account of what I'd witnessed along with my contact information. I also took photos of Marcus's injuries before the other officers left the scene. Sarah Chen pulled up several photographs on a tablet and approached the witness stand. "Are these the photos you took that evening?" Eric studied them, his jaw tightening at the images of Marcus's swollen face, the angry bruises on his wrists, the blood still streaming from his broken nose. "Yes, ma'am." "And did you later provide these to the district attorney's office when they opened their investigation?" "I did, along with a detailed written statement and my offer to testify if needed." Sarah returned to her table, but she didn't sit down. Instead, she turned to face Eric fully, and he could see the resolve hardening in her eyes. "Mr. Kane, I have to ask, what happened in this courtroom today? Officer Cole's assault on you while you were providing testimony. Does that change your account of the events of June 14th in any way?" Eric understood what she was doing, giving him a chance to either strengthen his testimony or, if he was intimidated, to back away from it, a lifeline or an escape route. He chose neither. "No, ma'am," Eric said clearly. "What happened today doesn't change what I witnessed 3 months ago. Officer Darren Cole abused his authority, used excessive force against a compliant suspect, and attempted to intimidate both the victim and potential witnesses. That was true on June 14th, and it remains true today." The courtroom erupted. Reporters were typing furiously. Someone in the back was trying to live stream, despite the judge's no recording order. Judge Holloway's gavel came down hard. "Order! I will have order in this courtroom." But Eric wasn't finished. "With the court's permission," he said, his voice cutting through the chaos, "I'd like to add one more thing to my testimony." The room went silent. Even Judge Holloway seemed caught off guard. "Go ahead, Mr. Kane." Eric looked directly at the empty defense table where Darren Cole had sat just an hour ago. "This isn't the first time I've witnessed police misconduct. And I understand the complexity of law enforcement, the split-second decisions, the genuine dangers officers face, the pressure they work under. I have immense respect for the badge when it's worn with honor." He paused. "But what I saw on June 14th wasn't a cop making a tough call in a dangerous situation. It was a man with a badge using it as permission to hurt someone he saw as less than human. And what happened here today proves that wasn't an isolated incident. It's a pattern." Sarah Chen had tears in her eyes. "Officer Cole kicked me today because he believed he could. Because in his 16 years on the force, he's learned that there are never real consequences. That complaints disappear. That witnesses get intimidated into silence. That the system will always protect him." Eric's voice remained calm, but everyone in the courtroom could feel the controlled fury underneath. He was wrong. Judge Holloway sat back in her chair, studying Eric with an expression that might have been respect or might have been concern, possibly both. "Is there anything else you'd like to add to your testimony, Mr. Kane?" "No, Your Honor, that's all." "Cross-examination, Mr. Frazier." The defense attorney stood slowly, looking like a man walking to his own execution. "No questions, Your Honor." The admission sent another ripple through the courtroom. A defense attorney with no cross-examination meant he had nothing, no way to discredit the witness, no angle to pursue, no defense worth mounting. "Very well." Judge Holloway's gavel came down with finality. "Mr. Kane, you are dismissed with the court's thanks. Given the extraordinary circumstances of today's proceedings, we will recess until tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., at which time I will rule on the matter of Officer Cole's contempt charges, as well as any additional criminal charges that may be filed stemming from his assault on Mr. Kane. Court is adjourned." As the gavel fell, Eric stepped down from the witness stand. His ribs ached. His lip was still bleeding sluggishly. But as he walked down the aisle toward the courtroom doors, something remarkable happened. One by one, people in the gallery stood up. It started with Diane Webb, tears streaming down her face. Then Marcus, his medical boot clunking against the floor. Then others people. Eric didn't know people who'd come to watch other cases, even the court reporter. By the time Eric reached the doors, the entire courtroom was standing in silent tribute. He didn't acknowledge it, didn't wave or nod or smile. He simply walked through the doors and into the hallway where Liam Sarah and Sergeant Naomi Price were waiting. That was... Liam started, but seemed unable to find the words. That was the truth, Naomi said quietly. Which around here might as well be a revolution. Eric pulled out his phone, looking at the video file Liam had sent him. 43 seconds of crystal clear footage showing Darren Cole's assault. Irrefutable evidence. Ms. Chen, he said without looking up from his phone. What's the name of the best investigative journalist in Birmingham? Sarah blinked. Probably Travis Morrison at the Post-Herald. Why? Because this story is bigger than one courtroom assault. Bigger than one cop with a bad record. Eric looked up, his eyes moving between the three of them. Sergeant Price, those 43 entries in your blue notebook, are you willing to testify about them? Naomi's face went pale. Eric, if I do that, I'm done. I'll lose my pension, my career, everything I've worked for. You'll lose all that anyway, Eric said gently. The moment your department finds out you talked to me today, and they will find out you become a liability, they'll find a way to push you out. They always do. Jesus. Naomi leaned against the wall, closing her eyes. You're right. God help me, you're right. But if we do this right, if we build a case that can't be ignored or buried, then maybe your sacrifice means something. Maybe it protects the next cop who tries to do the right thing. Liam looked between them. You're talking about an investigation, a real one. I'm talking about showing people what we already know, that Darren Cole isn't one bad apple. He's a symptom of a system that's been rotten for years. Eric's voice was calm, but there was something underneath it now, something that made all three of them understand why this man had survived a decade as a Navy SEAL. And I'm talking about making sure that when this is over, people like Cole can't hide behind a badge anymore. Sarah Chen shook her head slowly. Eric, what you're describing, that's not a legal case. That's a war. Eric finally smiled, though there was no humor in it. Then it's a good thing I've had some training. Outside the courthouse windows, the Birmingham sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. In his pocket, Eric's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from a number he didn't recognize. I know what you're doing. You just made a very dangerous enemy. A friend. Eric deleted the message and kept walking. The war had already begun. The Birmingham Post-Herald occupied a weathered brick building on 3rd Avenue North, the kind of structure that had seen better decades. The newspaper's glory days were visible in the ornate stonework above the entrance, but the current reality showed in the cracked windows and the faded lettering that hadn't been repainted since the early 2000s. Local journalism was dying, everyone said. But Travis Morrison hadn't gotten the memo. Eric found him on the 3rd floor in a bullpen that smelled like coffee-old paper and something that might have been desperation. Travis was exactly what Eric had expected. Mid-40s rumpled shirt, fingers stained with what looked like ink, but was probably just excessive pen clicking. He had the look of a man who'd been chasing stories for 20 years and had the scars to prove it. Mr. Morrison. Eric approached the desk, which was buried under stacks of files, old newspapers, and at least 3 coffee mugs in various states of abandonment. Travis looked up from his computer screen, his eyes narrowing with the automatic suspicion of a journalist who'd been lied to too many times. If you're here to complain about a story I wrote, the correction policy is on our website. If you're here to pitch a story, emails on my business card. If you're selling something, I'm the guy who got kicked in court yesterday. That made Travis pause. He sat back in his chair, really looking at Eric now. Eric Kane, Navy SEAL, testified against Darren Cole and got assaulted for it. He gestured to a chair that had a stack of newspapers on it. Move those and sit. You want coffee? It's terrible, but it's hot. I'm good. Eric moved the papers and sat down, noting how Travis's eyes had already shifted to his notepad, pen poised. Always working, always recording. I need to ask you something first, though, off the record. Nothing's off the record with me, Mr. Kane. That's not how journalism works. Then I'll make this simple. 3 years ago, did you investigate a suicide on Highway 280? A young man named Trevor Foster, who drove his car into a tree. The change in Travis's expression was immediate. The professional mask slipped, replaced by something that looked like old pain. I didn't investigate it. I tried to. Kid's brother came to me, said Trevor had been brutalized by a cop a few months before he died. Said there was a connection. I looked into it. He stopped, his jaw tightening. My editor killed the story. Said we didn't have enough evidence to make accusations against a police officer. Said the family was just looking for someone to blame for a tragic accident. But you didn't think it was an accident. I know it wasn't an accident. Travis pulled open a desk drawer and extracted a file folder worn from handling. Trevor Foster's medical records from the night he was arrested showed injuries consistent with assault. The police report from that night said he'd been minimally restrained. The arresting officer was Darren Cole. He opened the folder, spreading papers across the desk. In the 4 months between his arrest and his death, Trevor Foster saw a therapist 6 times. Every session note mentions trauma from police interaction, fear of law enforcement, nightmares about being pulled over again. Eric studied the documents. How did you get these? Trevor's brother Liam gave them to me. After his parents refused to pursue any action, Liam wanted someone to know the truth. I couldn't print it, but I kept it. Travis looked up. That's Liam Foster, journalism student at UAB. Same kid who recorded Cole kicking you yesterday. He's not a coincidence in your life, is he? No, he's not. Eric pulled out his phone and showed Travis the video. He gave me this, 43 seconds of Darren Cole committing assault in open court. Travis watched the video 3 times, his expression hardening with each viewing. This is career-ending. For Cole, anyway. For everyone else involved in protecting him, this is just Tuesday. That's why I'm here. I don't want to end one career. I want to expose the system that made it possible. Travis leaned back, studying Eric with new interest. You're not looking for justice. You're looking for war. I'm looking for the truth. And I think you've been looking for it too, for years. There was a long silence. In the bullpen around them, other journalists typed and talked on phones, chasing tomorrow's headlines. But at Travis's desk, something else was happening. A decision was being made. I have a filing cabinet in my apartment, Travis said finally. It's got 23 files in it. 23 stories I researched and wrote and couldn't get published. Police misconduct, missing evidence complaints that disappeared. All of it sourced, verified, documented. All of it killed by editors who didn't want to antagonize law enforcement. He met Eric's eyes. I've been waiting 3 years for someone to walk through that door and give me a reason to open that cabinet. So, yeah, Mr. Kane, let's go to war. Eric extended his hand. Call me Eric. Travis shook it. Call me Travis. And tell me you've got more than just that video, because if we're really doing this, we're going to need a hell of a lot more ammunition. I've got a cop with 17 filed complaints and a personal notebook documenting 43 incidents. I've got a student who's been recording courtroom proceedings for 3 years. And I've got a prosecutor who's tired of watching guilty cops walk free. Eric paused. What I don't have is someone who knows how to turn all that into a story people can't ignore. Travis smiled for the first time. It wasn't a pleasant smile. It was the smile of a man who'd been waiting for permission to burn something down. Then, let's get to work. 3 hours later, Eric's small apartment had become a war room. Travis had arrived with 2 boxes of files from his mysterious cabinet. Liam showed up with his laptop and an external hard drive containing 3 years of courtroom footage. Sarah Chen came despite her misgivings, bringing copies of every complaint filed against Darren Cole that she'd been able to access through official channels. And Naomi Price arrived last, still in uniform, carrying the blue notebook that could end her career. They spread everything across Eric's dining table, his coffee table, and eventually the floor. The scope of what they were looking at became clear quickly, and it was devastating. Okay, Travis said, standing in the center of the chaos with his notepad. Let's establish the pattern. Sarah, you said Cole has had 7 official complaints in 16 years. But Naomi, your notebook has 27 entries about Cole specifically. Where's the disconnect? Naomi sat cross-legged on the floor, the blue notebook open in her lap. Her hands were shaking slightly as she turned the pages. The complaints that get filed officially go through a specific process. Officer involved gets notified. Union rep gets involved. Internal Affairs opens an investigation. But there's another category, what we call informal complaints. Citizen comes to the station, expresses concerns, but doesn't want to file formal paperwork. Maybe they're scared. Maybe they don't trust the system. Maybe they just want someone to know. And those complaints go where? Eric asked. They're supposed to be logged in a separate database, tracked for patterns even if they're not formally investigated. Naomi's voice dropped. They're not. They get written up in a daily report, and then they disappear. Liam looked up from his laptop. Disappear how, like deliberately deleted? No more subtle than that. They get classified as general inquiries or community concerns. The officer's name gets removed from the digital record for privacy reasons. Within a month, there's no way to connect the complaint to the specific officer. Naomi flipped through her notebook. I started keeping this because I noticed the pattern. I'd take a complaint at the desk, write it up properly, include the officer's name and badge number. 2 weeks later, I'd check the database, and the complaint would still be there, but it would be listed as general inquiry about traffic stop procedures, with no names attached. Sarah Chen had gone pale. That's deliberate systemic obstruction. That's not just one bad cop or one lazy administrator. That's institutional policy. It's worse than that, Travis said quietly. He was holding one of the files from his cabinet, comparing it to something Liam had pulled up on his screen. Liam, can you search your footage for any cases involving Officer Marcus Reeves, specifically cases from 2022? Liam's fingers flew across the keyboard. Yeah, I've got 4 separate courtroom appearances, all traffic stop related. 3 resulted in dropped charges, 1 in a settlement. Now cross-reference those with this. Travis handed him a printout. These are complaints I pulled from public records requests 2 years ago. 6 formal complaints against Marcus Reeves in 2022 alone. So, Liam scanned the documents. Reeves got more complaints than Cole? Reeves doesn't exist anymore. Travis's voice was grim. I called the Birmingham PD Public Information Office last month for an unrelated story. Asked about Officer Marcus Reeves. They told me no one by that name has ever been employed by the department. The room went silent. That's impossible, Naomi whispered. I worked with Marcus for 4 years. We did ride-alongs together. He was... She stopped, her face going ashen. Oh my God. What? Eric moved closer. He transferred out. About 18 months ago. Said he was moving to Atlanta to be closer to family. We had a going-away party at O'Malley's. I was there. I gave him a card. Naomi's hands were trembling now. But if the department says he never existed, then they scrubbed him. Travis was writing furiously. And if they scrubbed one officer who had too many complaints, how many others have they scrubbed? Eric felt something cold settle in his stomach. This isn't about Darren Cole. It's not even about police misconduct. This is about evidence destruction on a massive scale. No. Sarah stood abruptly, pacing the small apartment. No, this is bigger than evidence destruction. This is about creating a system where accountability is literally impossible. If complaints disappear, if officers' records get erased, if whole people get deleted from databases, how do you even begin to prove a pattern of misconduct? You can't, Naomi said softly. That's the point. Every complaint becomes isolated. Every incident stands alone. No pattern, no problem. Liam's face had lost all color. Trevor's complaint, the one he filed against Cole, Is that why there's no record of it? Did they? Let me check something. Travis pulled out his phone, dialing a number. Hey, it's Morrison at the Post-Herald. I need to verify employment history for a Birmingham PD officer. Yeah, I'll hold. He covered the phone, looking at Naomi. Give me names. Officers you know transferred out or retired in the last 5 years who had multiple complaints. Naomi rattled off 6 names, her voice mechanical. Travis relayed them to whoever was on the phone, then listened for a long moment. His expression darkened with each passing second. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. And you're certain? Okay, thanks. He hung up and looked around the room. Public information says 3 of those 6 names never worked for Birmingham PD. The other 3 show employment records but 0 complaints in their files. Jesus Christ, Sarah breathed. This is RICO territory, Travis said. This is conspiracy. This is obstruction of justice on a departmental level. This is... He stopped his journalist's instincts kicking in. This is the biggest story Birmingham has seen in 30 years. Eric walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Darren Cole was probably at home confident that even his courtroom assault would be managed, contained, made to disappear like everything else. Somewhere out there, officers like Naomi were struggling with the decision to speak up or stay silent. And somewhere out there, families like the Fosters were grieving losses that the system refused to even acknowledge. We need proof, Eric said without turning around. Everything we have right now is circumstantial. Naomi's notebook, Travis's dead stories, missing database entries. A good lawyer could explain all of it as administrative errors, or budget cuts, or system migrations. Then what do you suggest? Naomi asked. Eric turned to face them. We need someone on the inside, someone who can access the databases directly and document what's being deleted and why. That's not possible, Naomi said immediately. The kind of access you're talking about requires administrative privileges, detective level at minimum, and anyone with that kind of access is either part of the problem or too scared to become part of the solution. What about the IT department? Liam suggested. The people who actually maintain the databases. They'd have access, right? Travis snapped his fingers. That's actually brilliant. IT guys are usually civilians, not sworn officers. They're not part of the blue wall. He pulled out his phone again, scrolling through contacts. I know someone. Met him at a city budget hearing 2 years ago. He was complaining about being asked to purge old records to save storage space. At the time, I thought it was just a nerdy guy mad about bad data management practices. But now, Sarah prompted, now I'm thinking maybe he was telling me he was being asked to destroy evidence and didn't realize it. Travis was already typing out a message. His name's Reggie Walsh. Works in the Records Division IT department. If anyone would know how the data's being manipulated, it's him. 30 minutes later, Reggie Walsh walked into Eric's apartment, looking like he'd rather be literally anywhere else. He was in his late 20s, thin and nervous, with the posture of someone who spent too much time hunched over a computer. His eyes darted around the room, taking in the spread of documents and files with increasing alarm. Travis, you said you needed to ask me some technical questions about database management. His voice was high anxious. You didn't say anything about whatever this is. Reggie, this is Eric Kane, Sarah Chen, Naomi Price, and Liam Foster. Travis gestured to each of them. We're investigating systemic data manipulation within the Birmingham Police Department's complaint records system. And we think you might be able to help us understand how it's being done. Reggie went very still. I can't talk about internal systems. I signed an NDA. I could lose my job. Your job is helping them erase evidence of police brutality, Liam said sharply. Trevor's death is on those erased records. How many other people are dead because complaints disappeared? Liam. Eric's voice was gentle but firm. Let him breathe. He turned to Reggie. Nobody's asking you to violate your NDA right now. We're asking you to listen, and then if you choose to help us, we'll protect you. I give you my word." Reggie laughed bitterly. "Your word, man? I don't even know you." "Then know this." Eric met his eyes directly. 2 days ago, a police officer kicked me in open court because I testified about his misconduct. That officer has a 16-year history of abuse that's been systematically covered up. And right now, somewhere in Birmingham, there's another Marcus Webb getting pulled over, another Trevor Foster being beaten down, another family about to lose someone they love. You can help us stop that, or you can go home and pretend you don't know what's happening. But you do know, and that knowledge is going to follow you for the rest of your life. The silence stretched out. Reggie's hands were shaking. He pulled off his glasses and cleaned them on his shirt, a nervous gesture that seemed more about buying time than improving his vision. "If I tell you what I know," he said finally, "and it comes out that I was the source, I'm done. Not just fired, blacklisted. I work in a specialized field. Birmingham PD contracts with 3 other municipalities for records management. If they blackball me, I can't work anywhere in the state. Then we'll make sure it doesn't come out." Travis pulled out his notepad. "Deep background, no attribution. Your information guides our investigation, but your name never appears anywhere. And if someone figures it out anyway, then I have a friend at a cybersecurity firm in Austin who's always looking for talented people," Eric said. "You help us, and I'll make sure you land on your feet no matter what happens." Reggie looked around the room again, studying each face. Whatever he saw there must have convinced him, because he sighed and sank into the nearest chair. Okay. But I need you to understand something first. What's happening? It's not some rogue administrator deleting files. It's built into the system. It's automated." That got everyone's attention. "Explain," Sarah said. Reggie took a breath. "About 3 years ago, the department got a grant to upgrade their records management system. Sold it as modernization, better efficiency, improved data security. The new system is called Justice Link. It's supposed to be cutting-edge AI-assisted categorization, automated reporting, predictive analytics." "Predictive analytics for what?" Liam asked. "Crime prevention, resource allocation. The system analyzes complaint patterns, incident reports, arrest records, everything, and generates predictions about where crimes are likely to occur, which areas need more patrols, that kind of thing." Reggie's voice was picking up speed now, falling into the rhythm of explaining technical concepts. "But to make the predictions accurate, the system needs clean data. No duplicates, no errors, no inconsistencies." "And who decides what counts as an error?" Eric asked quietly. "That's the thing." Reggie leaned forward. "The system does. It has rules built into its algorithm. If a complaint doesn't meet certain criteria, specific enough description, corroborating evidence, proper procedural filing, it gets flagged as potentially inaccurate. And here's where it gets ugly. Flagged complaints don't disappear immediately. They get moved to a separate database, a kind of purgatory, where they're supposed to be reviewed by a human administrator." "But they're not," Naomi said. "They're not. The review queue has over 12,000 entries. Nobody's checking them. Nobody's ever going to check them. It would take years. So they just sit there, technically not deleted, but completely inaccessible through normal channels." Sarah was writing frantically. "So legally, the department can claim they haven't destroyed any records." "Exactly. The data exists. It's just been quarantined as unreliable. And over time, there's an automatic purge protocol. After 18 months in quarantine with no review entries, get permanently archived to cold storage. After 3 years in cold storage, they're deleted to save space." "Trevor's complaint would have been deleted 6 months ago," Liam said, his voice hollow. Eric felt rage building in his chest, but he kept his voice level. "Reggie, who decides the criteria for what gets flagged, who programmed those rules. That's above my pay grade. I just maintain the infrastructure. But I know the criteria were set during the implementation phase, and they've been tweaked several times since then. There's a vendor that manages the Justice Link system, a company called Sentinel Solutions out of Atlanta. They handle all the algorithm updates. Travis was already Googling on his phone. Sentinel Solutions, founded 2018, specializes in predictive policing software and law enforcement data management. CEO is a former police chief from, oh, this is interesting, former Birmingham PD Deputy Chief Gerald Marks. He retired in 2019 and founded Sentinel 6 months later. So the department pays a company run by their former deputy chief to manage a system that automatically hides complaints against officers. Sarah's voice was deadly calm, and because it's automated, no one can be held responsible for the results. It's perfect, Travis murmured. It's completely diabolically perfect. Reggie nodded miserably. I've been trying to tell myself it was just bad programming, unintended consequences. But 3 months ago, I found something that made me realize it wasn't accidental. He pulled out his own laptop, opening it and typing rapidly. I was doing routine maintenance, and I noticed something weird in the audit logs. Someone with administrator credentials was manually reclassifying complaint severity levels, taking Level 3 complaints, excessive force civil rights violations, and downgrading them to Level 1, which is basically, officer was rude. And Level 1 complaints get automatically flagged as low priority, Naomi said, understanding dawning. They go to the quarantine queue first. Bingo. I tracked the administrator account. It belongs to Lieutenant Raymond Shaw, head of internal affairs. The name hung in the air like poison. Shaw personally approved the clearance on all 7 of Darren Cole's official complaints, Sarah said softly. I remember seeing his signature on every investigation closure. So we have a system designed to hide complaints, Eric summarized, managed by a company with financial incentive to keep departments happy, with manual manipulation happening at the highest levels of internal affairs, all wrapped in enough technical complexity that most people can't even understand what's happening, let alone prove it. That's about the size of it, Reggie confirmed. Travis was grinning now, that fierce journalist smile that meant he'd found the story. This is Pulitzer-level stuff. This isn't just Birmingham. If Sentinel Solutions is selling this system to other departments, this could be happening in cities across the country. We need proof, Sarah said. Reggie, can you document the manual reclassifications? Show a pattern of Shaw manipulating the data. I can pull the audit logs, yeah. But that's just data. You'd need someone who understands database architecture to testify about what it means. You, Eric said simply. You'd need to testify. Reggie's face went white. No way. I said I'd help, but I can't. You can. Eric's voice was gentle but unyielding. And you will. Because you're not the kind of person who can live with knowing the truth and doing nothing about it. That's why you kept those audit logs instead of deleting them. That's why you came here tonight even though you were scared. You're not a bystander, Reggie. You never were. Tears were forming in Reggie's eyes. They'll destroy me. Maybe, Eric acknowledged. Or maybe you become the whistleblower who exposed the biggest police corruption scandal in Alabama history. Maybe you're the reason the next Trevor Foster doesn't die. Maybe your name ends up meaning something more than just another person who stayed quiet because it was easier. Reggie wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. When he spoke again, his voice was stronger. I'll need immunity and protection. I'm not going to prison for doing the right thing. We can arrange that, Sarah said. I'll contact the FBI field office. This is federal civil rights territory now. Travis was already writing, his pen flying across the page. I need to get this drafted tonight. We'll need to publish before they know we're coming. The moment this goes live, they'll start destroying evidence. How long do you need? Eric asked. 72 hours. I need to verify everything, get quotes from legal experts, build the narrative. And I need to get my editor on board, which might be the hardest part. I can help with that. Sarah pulled out her business card. Have your editor call me. I'll explain the legal implications. When they understand we're handing them documented evidence of a federal conspiracy, they'll run it. Naomi had been quiet for several minutes, staring at her blue notebook. When she finally spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. I've been a cop for 22 years. I became a sergeant because I thought I could change things from the inside. I thought if I just documented everything, if I just followed the rules, eventually someone would listen. She looked up, tears streaming down her face. But the rules were designed to make sure no one ever listened. All those entries in my notebook, they were never going to matter. The system was built to make them not matter. Eric knelt beside her. They matter now. Because of you, we know the truth. Because you kept that notebook, we have a record that can't be deleted or quarantined or explained away. You didn't change the system from the inside, Naomi, but you're about to help burn it down and build something better. She nodded, wiping her tears. What do you need from me? Your testimony, your notebook, and your courage. Eric stood looking around at the assembled group. We all know what's about to happen. The moment Travis's story publishes, this becomes public. The department will circle the wagons. They'll attack our credibility, question our motives, try to discredit every piece of evidence we have. It's going to get ugly. Let it, Liam said fiercely. Trevor deserves ugly. He deserves everyone knowing the truth. Then we move forward. Eric pulled out his phone, looking at the threatening text message he'd received earlier. And we do it fast before they realize how much trouble they're in. Travis closed his notebook with finality. 72 hours. Then we light the fuse and watch it all burn. As the meeting broke up and people gathered their materials, Eric stood at the window again, watching Birmingham's lights. Somewhere out there, Darren Cole was sleeping soundly, confident in his protection. Lieutenant Shaw was probably having dinner, unconcerned about the digital trail he'd left. And Gerald Marks was probably counting his profits from Sentinel Solutions, never imagining that the system he'd built to hide the truth was about to expose it. They had no idea what was coming. But in 72 hours, the whole city would know. The storm was gathering, and Eric Kane had learned a long time ago how to navigate storms. You didn't run from them. You didn't hide. You sailed straight through the center and came out stronger on the other side. He just hoped Birmingham was ready for what that meant. The next morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. Eric woke at 0500 hours, old military habits dying hard, and found 3 missed calls on his phone. 2 from numbers he didn't recognize. 1 from Naomi Price, time-stamped at 3:47 a.m. He called her back immediately. They know. Her voice was raw, like she'd been crying or hadn't slept. Probably both. I don't know how, but they know something's happening. Eric sat up, already reaching for his jeans. What happened? I got called into a meeting with Lieutenant Shaw at midnight. Midnight, Eric. He said there were irregularities in some of my recent reports. Said Internal Affairs needed to review my conduct over the past year. He asked me point blank if I'd been talking to reporters. Her breath hitched. I denied it. I lied to a superior officer. 22 years on the force, and I've never done that before. You did what you had to do. What did Shaw say? He smiled. God, that smile. Like he knew I was lying and enjoyed watching me do it. Then he put me on administrative leave pending investigation, effective immediately. I have to surrender my badge and weapon today at noon. Eric was already pulling on his shirt phone, wedged between his shoulder and ear. Don't go alone. I'll be there with you. Eric, if you show up at the station, it'll just confirm their suspicions that we're working together. I don't care what it confirms. You're not facing them alone. He grabbed his keys. Where are you now? My apartment. I haven't slept. I keep thinking about all those entries in my notebook, all those people I documented but couldn't help. What if we fail? What if this whole thing falls apart and it was all for nothing? It won't be for nothing. Eric's voice carried absolute certainty. Naomi, listen to me. You've already won. The moment you decided to speak up, you won. Everything else is just making sure that victory counts. There was silence on the line, then a shaky breath. Okay. I'll meet you at the station at 11:30. Eric hung up and immediately dialed Travis. The journalist answered on the first ring, sounding wide awake despite the early hour. I know. Naomi texted me 20 minutes ago. They're moving faster than I expected. How's the story coming? I've got the draft done. It's good, Eric. It's really good. But my editor wants corroboration from the FBI before we run it. Says we can't accuse a police department of systematic evidence destruction without federal backing. Then get it. You said Sarah was contacting the FBI field office. She did, yesterday afternoon. They're sending someone to interview Reggie this morning at 9. Travis paused. But here's the problem. FBI investigations move slow. Even with everything we're handing them, it could be weeks before they're ready to move. And we don't have weeks. The moment they put Naomi on leave, they started the clock. They'll be purging evidence, intimidating witnesses, building their defense. Eric checked his watch. So we accelerate. What do you need to publish today? Today, Eric, I've got maybe 60% of what I need verified. I've got Reggie's testimony, Naomi's notebook, your video of Cole's assault. But I need more. I need someone from Sentinel Solutions to confirm the system's design. I need documentation showing Shaw manually reclassified complaints. You need a smoking gun. Eric was thinking fast, running through options. What if we give them one? What are you talking about? Cole's contempt hearing is this morning at 9. Judge Holloway is ruling on the assault charges and setting bail. I'll be there as the victim. So will Cole. So will Lieutenant Shaw, probably as Cole's superior officer. Travis went quiet for a moment. You want to confront them publicly? I want to ask questions they can't answer. On record. In open court. With you there covering it. That's risky. If you tip them off to what we know, they already know something's happening. Naomi's suspension proves that. But they don't know how much we have or when we're moving. If I can get Shaw or Cole to lie under oath to commit to a version of events that we can prove is false, then we've got them on perjury on top of everything else. Travis's voice had shifted, energized. And perjury charges mean their testimony becomes worthless in their own defense. Eric, that's brilliant, but you've got to be careful. These guys are cornered rats right now. Cornered rats bite. Let them. Eric grabbed his jacket. I've survived worse than Darren Cole and Raymond Shaw. I'll see you at the courthouse at 8:30. The Jefferson County Courthouse steps were crowded by 8:15. Word had spread about Cole's contempt hearing, and the combination of a cop facing charges, plus the viral video of the assault, had drawn media attention like blood in water. Eric counted cameras from at least 6 news outlets, plus a cluster of protesters holding signs that read, Blue Lives Murder, and Justice for Marcus Webb. Sarah Chen met him at the security checkpoint, her expression grim. Have you seen the morning news? I've been a little busy. She pulled up a video on her phone. A local morning show anchor, perfectly coiffed and deeply concerned, was interviewing someone identified as Police Union Representative Michael Torres. Torres's voice was smooth, practiced. What we witnessed in that courtroom was a tragedy on multiple levels. Officer Cole has been under tremendous stress due to a targeted harassment campaign by anti-police activists. His actions, while regrettable, need to be understood in that context. This is a good man, a dedicated officer with 16 years of exemplary service. Exemplary. Sarah's voice was sharp with anger. They're already spinning it. By tonight, Cole will be the victim, and you'll be the activist with an agenda. Eric watched the rest of the interview. Torres went on to suggest that Eric's testimony had been inflammatory and biased, that his military background might have given him a distorted view of appropriate police procedures, and that the whole incident was being blown out of proportion by people who don't understand the realities of law enforcement. It's textbook, Eric said quietly. Attack the witness, muddy the narrative, make it about anything except what actually happened. It's working. I've already had 3 calls this morning from reporters asking about your background, your motivations, whether you have any history of anti-police activism. Sarah shook her head. They're building a file on you, Eric, looking for anything they can use. Then it's good that I don't have anything to hide. He handed her phone back. Is Reggie talking to the FBI right now? Should be. I sent over an attorney from my office to sit with him. The FBI agent handling it is named Catherine Pierce. She's got a reputation for being thorough but cautious. Don't expect her to move fast. Travis appeared from the crowd camera bag over his shoulder. Eric, I need a quote before we go in. Official statement about the hearing. The truth doesn't need a statement. It just needs to be heard. Travis grinned. That's perfect. Quotable and vague enough that they can't spin it. He pulled out his recorder. One more thing. I did some digging on Gerald Marks, the Sentinel Solutions CEO. Turns out he retired from Birmingham PD about 6 months after a sexual harassment complaint was filed against him by a female officer. Complaint was investigated by, let me guess, Lieutenant Raymond Shaw. Bingo! And it was closed as unsubstantiated, despite 3 witnesses corroborating the victim's account. Travis's expression was dark. Shaw's been protecting people for years. Cole's just the latest. The courthouse doors opened, and they filed in with the crowd. The hallways buzzed with conversation, speculation, anticipation. Eric spotted Liam near the courtroom entrance, his camera ready, his young face set with determination. You okay? Eric asked him. Liam nodded. I keep thinking about Trevor, about how he'd be proud that we're doing this. He was always the brave one, you know, always standing up for what was right. I was the quiet one, the one who just watched. His voice cracked slightly. Not anymore. Marcus Webb and his mother Diane were there too, sitting on a bench outside the courtroom. Marcus's medical boot was gone now, but he still limped slightly when he stood to shake Eric's hand. Thank you, Marcus said simply, for what you did, for what you're still doing. You don't need to thank me. You had the courage to press charges in the first place. Diane Webb gripped Eric's arm, her eyes fierce despite the tears gathered there. That man destroyed my baby's sense of safety. Marcus won't drive anymore, won't go out alone, wakes up with nightmares about that night. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Make him pay. Please. Before Eric could respond, a commotion at the end of the hall drew everyone's attention. Darren Cole was arriving flanked by his attorney Mitchell Frazier and another man in a police dress uniform sporting lieutenant's bars. Raymond Shaw was exactly what Eric expected. Late 50s iron-gray hair, the kind of command presence that came from decades of being obeyed without question. Cole looked haggard, like he hadn't slept. But Shaw looked calm, almost amused as his eyes scanned the crowd and landed on Eric with the precision of a targeting system. He walked directly toward them. Mr. Kane. Shaw's voice was smooth authoritative. I'm Lieutenant Raymond Shaw, Internal Affairs. I was hoping we could have a word before the hearing begins. Sarah stepped between them immediately. Lieutenant Shaw, Mr. Kane is represented by counsel. Any communication needs to go through me. Shaw smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Of course, Counselor. I simply wanted to express the department's regret about the unfortunate incident in court yesterday. Officer Cole was clearly experiencing a mental health crisis, and we want Mr. Kane to know that we take these matters very seriously. Mental health crisis, Eric repeated flatly. Is that what we're calling assault now? We're calling it a tragedy. For everyone involved. Shaw's tone remained pleasant, but there was steel underneath. Officer Cole has agreed to undergo a full psychological evaluation. The department is prepared to offer Mr. Kane a formal apology and compensation for his injuries. All we ask in return is that he consider the impact that pursuing criminal charges might have on a man's entire career, his family, his future. The hallway had gone quiet. Everyone was watching. You're asking me to drop the charges, Eric said. I'm asking you to consider compassion, forgiveness, understanding that good people sometimes make mistakes under pressure. Sarah's hand tightened on Eric's arm in warning, but he ignored it. Lieutenant Shaw, I have a question for you. Of course. How many complaints have been filed against Officer Cole in his 16-year career? Shaw's smile never wavered. I'm not at liberty to discuss internal personnel matters. 7 official complaints. That's public record. But how many informal complaints? How many people came to the station, told their story, and never saw justice? Mr. Kane, I understand you're upset. I'm not upset, I'm curious. Eric's voice was calm, almost conversational. See, I've been learning about your department's record-keeping systems. Very sophisticated. Very modern. But here's what I can't figure out. If someone files a complaint and it gets classified as unreliable, who makes that determination? The change in Shaw's expression was minute, barely perceptible. But Eric saw it. The first crack in the facade. Our systems follow strict protocols designed by experts in law enforcement data management. Experts like Gerald Marks, former deputy chief, now CEO of Sentinel Solutions. Shaw's smile was gone now. I'm not sure what you're implying, Mr. Kane, but I'd be very careful about making unfounded accusations. I'm not making accusations. I'm asking questions. Eric took a step closer. Here's another one. Trevor Foster, 22 years old, filed a complaint against Officer Cole 3 years ago after being assaulted during a traffic stop. Where's that complaint now, Lieutenant? Liam made a sound like he'd been punched. Shaw's eyes narrowed. I don't recall that specific case. You don't recall it because it's been deleted, quarantined by an algorithm designed to make complaints disappear. But the audit logs remember. They remember everything, including your username manually reclassifying excessive force complaints as officer discourtesy. The hallway exploded with activity. Reporters surged forward. Camera flashes went off. Travis was recording everything, his face alight with journalistic ecstasy. Shaw's professional mask shattered completely. His face flushed dark red. You have no idea what you're talking about. Those systems are confidential. Not anymore. Eric's voice cut through the chaos. In about 48 hours, everyone's going to know exactly how confidential they are. Mr. Kane. Judge Holloway's clerk had emerged from the courtroom, her voice sharp. Court is in session. You need to come in now. Shaw leaned in close, his voice dropping to a whisper only Eric could hear. You just made the biggest mistake of your life, sailor boy. You think you know how this works. You're about to find out. I already know how it works, Lieutenant. I just don't care anymore. Eric turned and walked into the courtroom, leaving Shaw standing in the hallway, his carefully constructed world beginning to crumble around him. Courtroom 7B was packed to capacity. Judge Holloway looked even more severe than yesterday, if that was possible. She waited until everyone was seated and the doors were closed before speaking. We are here for the contempt hearing of Officer Darren Cole, who stands accused of assault and battery against witness Eric Kane during testimony yesterday afternoon. Mr. Cole, please rise. Cole stood his attorney beside him. He looked smaller, somehow diminished. The swagger from yesterday was gone, replaced by something that might have been fear. Mr. Cole, before we proceed, I want to be absolutely clear about the gravity of this situation. You committed a violent assault in my courtroom in front of 40 witnesses against a man who was under oath providing testimony. This is not a minor infraction. This is a crime that strikes at the heart of our judicial system. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor. Cole's voice was subdued. Your attorney has filed a motion requesting psychiatric evaluation and suggesting that you were not in your right mind at the time of the incident. Is that your position? Frazier stood quickly. Your Honor, Officer Cole has been under enormous stress due to what he perceives as a coordinated campaign to... I asked Mr. Cole, not you, Counselor. Judge Holloway's tone could have frozen nitrogen. Mr. Cole. Cole swallowed hard. Yes, Your Honor. I wasn't thinking clearly. The accusations being made against me, they're false, and hearing them repeated in court, I snapped. You snapped. Judge Holloway leaned forward. Mr. Cole, I've been a judge for 23 years. I've seen defendants snap. I've seen witnesses snap. I've seen attorneys snap, God help us, but I have never in 23 years seen a police officer, a trained law enforcement professional, assault a witness, and then claim he wasn't thinking clearly. Do you know why? Cole said nothing. Because police officers are supposed to be the ones who stay calm under pressure, who de-escalate situations, who protect people, not attack them. She turned to Eric. Mr. Kane, please approach the bench. Eric stood and walked forward. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Mr. Kane, you are the victim in this assault. The state is prepared to file criminal charges against Mr. Cole, but I want to hear from you directly. Do you wish to press charges? Eric looked at Cole, really looked at him. Saw a man who'd been protected for so long that he'd forgotten how to be accountable. Saw someone who'd used his badge as a weapon for 16 years and never faced consequences. Saw the fear in his eyes now that consequences were finally real. Your Honor, I have a question first. Judge Holloway raised an eyebrow. Proceed. Eric turned to Cole directly. When you pulled over Marcus Webb on June 14th, what was the description of the suspect you were looking for? Frazier shot to his feet. Objection. This is a contempt hearing, not a retrial of overruled. I'm curious about this myself. Judge Holloway gestured for Eric to continue. What was the description, Officer Cole? Cole's face was pale. I was conducting a routine traffic stop. That's not what your report says. Your report says Marcus matched the description of a suspect wanted in connection with a robbery 3 blocks away. So, what was the description? I don't recall the exact. Black male, late teens to early 20s, approximately 5'10". That was the description, wasn't it? Cole nodded mutely. Eric's voice was quiet, but it carried through the courtroom like a bell. Do you know how many black teenagers in Birmingham match that description, Officer Cole? Thousands. Tens of thousands. But Marcus Webb wasn't pulled over because he matched a description. He was pulled over because you saw a black kid in a nice car and made assumptions. And when your assumptions turned out to be wrong when Marcus was just a student going home from debate practice, you didn't apologize. You doubled down. You brutalized him. You tried to scare him into not reporting what happened. That's not. And when I testified about what I witnessed, you kicked me in open court. Because the idea that someone might hold you accountable was so foreign, so impossible to you, that you literally couldn't control yourself. Eric paused. Do you know what the saddest part is? Cole was trembling now. The saddest part is that you actually believe you're the victim here. You believe that accountability equals persecution. That being asked to follow the same rules as everyone else is somehow unfair. Eric turned back to Judge Holloway. Your Honor, I want to press full charges, not because I want revenge, but because until people like Officer Cole face real consequences, nothing will change. The system that protected him for 16 years will keep protecting the next Darren Cole and the next and the next. Someone has to say enough. The judge nodded slowly. Mr. Cole, you are hereby found in contempt of court. Bail is set at $50,000. Criminal charges of assault and battery will be filed by the district attorney's office. You are to surrender your badge and weapon immediately and are suspended without pay pending trial. The gavel came down. And Mr. Cole, if I ever see you in my courtroom again under these circumstances, I will hold you without bail. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor. As Cole was led away by the bailiff, Eric walked back through the gallery. Reporters were already rushing out to file their stories. Sarah was on her phone, probably calling the FBI. Travis was typing furiously on his laptop, but Eric's eyes found Liam standing in the back row with tears streaming down his face. That was for Trevor, Eric said quietly as he passed. Liam nodded, unable to speak. Outside the courtroom, the chaos was immediate. Cameras, microphones, reporters shouting questions. Eric pushed through them without comment. Sarah running interference. They made it to the courthouse steps before Lieutenant Shaw intercepted them again, this time with 2 other officers flanking him. "Very impressive performance in there, Mr. Kane." Shaw's voice dripped with false civility. "But you should know that making wild accusations about our record-keeping systems constitutes defamation. The department's attorneys will be filing suit." "File away." Eric met his eyes steadily. "Discovery should be interesting." Shaw's jaw clenched. "You're playing a dangerous game." "It's not a game, and the only danger is to people who've been hiding behind broken systems for too long." Eric started to walk past, then stopped. "Oh, and Lieutenant, you might want to check your audit logs. I hear there's some interesting reading in there." He left Shaw standing on the courthouse steps, surrounded by reporters now shouting questions about data manipulation and evidence destruction. 3 blocks away in a coffee shop, Eric finally allowed himself to breathe. Sarah sat across from him, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea she wasn't drinking. That was either the bravest thing I've ever seen or the most reckless. Maybe both. Eric checked his phone. A text from Travis. "Story goes live in 6 hours. FBI is moving faster than expected. Pierce wants to interview you this afternoon." Another text from Naomi. "I turned in my badge. They searched my locker. Didn't find the notebook. It's safe." And one more from a number he didn't recognize. "What you did today mattered. Thank you. Reggie." Sarah leaned forward. "Eric, I need to ask you something. When you questioned Cole about the description about why he really pulled Marcus over, that wasn't about this case, was it?" "No. That was about every case like this. Every black kid pulled over for matching a description that could describe anyone. Every pretextual stop that turns into an arrest or worse." "Yes. And when you said those 6 words in court yesterday, 'You don't know who I am,' what did you mean?" Eric was quiet for a long moment. "I meant that Darren Cole looked at me and saw what he wanted to see. Not a decorated veteran, not a witness, just another black man he could intimidate. And I meant that he had no idea what he'd just started. That the system he'd relied on to protect him was about to fail. Because of you. Because of all of us. Naomi, Reggie, Liam, Travis, you, Marcus and his mother. Even Trevor in a way. We're all part of this now." Sarah's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her eyes widened. "FBI agent Pierce wants to meet in 1 hour. She says it's urgent. They're opening a formal investigation into Birmingham PD." That was fast. Reggie's testimony must have been damning. Sarah stood gathering her things. "Eric, this is really happening. We're actually going to take them down." "Maybe. Or maybe they'll circle the wagons and we'll spend years in court fighting them." "Does that scare you?" Eric thought about Marcus Webb's nightmares. Trevor Foster's suicide. The 17 reports Naomi had filed that went nowhere. The thousands of complaints quarantined and deleted by algorithms designed to hide the truth. "No," he said finally. "It doesn't scare me at all." 4 hours later, FBI agent Catherine Pierce sat in Sarah's office with 6 boxes of evidence spread across the conference table. She was in her early 40s, sharp-eyed and no-nonsense with the kind of intensity that came from a career spent chasing people who thought they were untouchable. "Mr. Kane, I'll be direct. What your IT specialist gave us this morning is enough to open investigations in 17 cities where Sentinel Solutions has contracts. The scope of this is staggering." She pulled out a document. "We've identified over 40,000 complaints that were improperly quarantined or deleted across those 17 departments. 40,000, Mr. Kane." Eric felt the number land like a physical weight. How many of those were against the same officers? How many repeat offenders? "We're still analyzing the data, but preliminary numbers suggest that approximately 1,200 officers account for 60% of those complaints. 1,200 officers who've been protected by a system designed to hide patterns of misconduct." "And Darren Cole." Pierce's expression hardened. "Officer Cole has generated 147 complaints across his career. 140. Only 7 made it into the official record. The rest were quarantined and subsequently deleted. Sarah made a sound like she'd been hit. 147 people. 147 incidents where someone said, "This officer hurt me," and the system just erased them. Not just erased, deliberately hidden using software sold by a company run by former law enforcement. It's systematic, it's organized, and it's illegal on about 6 different federal levels. Pierce looked directly at Eric. "We're going to need your testimony. All of you. This is going to be a long investigation." "How long?" "Months at minimum, maybe years. These cases are complex, and the departments involved have resources and political connections. They'll fight every step." She paused. "I need to know if you're prepared for that, because once we move forward officially, there's no going back. Your name will be attached to this. You'll be the face of it. That comes with consequences." Eric thought about the threatening text message, about Shaw's thinly veiled threats, about the smear campaign that was probably already being planned. "I'm prepared. Even if it costs you your privacy, your peace, maybe your safety." Especially then. Eric's voice was firm. "Because if people like me, people with resources, with visibility, with protection, won't stand up, then we're asking the most vulnerable people to fight battles we won't fight ourselves. That's not acceptable." Pierce studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Okay. Then here's what happens next. We're executing search warrants on Birmingham PD records tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. We're seizing servers' documents, everything related to complaint processing. Simultaneously, we're serving warrants on Sentinel Solutions in Atlanta. Gerald Marks is about to have a very bad day." "What about Lieutenant Shaw?" "He's being placed under investigation for evidence tampering, obstruction of justice, and civil rights violations. If your journalist friend publishes his story before our raids, it might spook them into destroying additional evidence. Can you ask him to hold off 24 hours? Eric pulled out his phone and texted Travis. The response came back immediately. "FBI raid tomorrow." "That's even better. I'll publish the story as the warrants are being served. Maximum impact." He showed the message to Pierce, who smiled grimly. "Your friend understands timing. Good. Then we move tomorrow at dawn." As the meeting wrapped up and Pierce left to coordinate with her team, Eric stood at Sarah's office window, watching Birmingham's skyline as the sun set. Tomorrow would change everything. Tomorrow the truth would finally have teeth. His phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Eric Kane, a woman's voice shaking with emotion. "Mr. Kane, my name is Patricia Chen. Officer Chen from the night Marcus Webb was pulled over. I was one of the responding officers." Eric remembered. The officer who'd looked uncomfortable with Cole's actions. "I need to talk to someone. About what I've seen. About what's been happening in our department." Her voice broke. "I've been a cop for 8 years, and I've watched good people get pushed out for reporting misconduct. I've watched bad cops get promoted, and I've been too scared to say anything because I have a daughter and a mortgage, and I couldn't risk losing my job. But you're calling now. Because I watched that video of Cole kicking you, and I thought about all the times I stayed silent, all the times I told myself it wasn't my place to speak up, and I realized that silence makes me complicit." She took a shaky breath. "I have documentation. Reports I kept copies of before they were altered or disappeared. Names of other officers who wanted to report misconduct but were threatened into silence. I want to help, if it's not too late." Eric felt something loosen in his chest. One more voice joining the chorus. One more person choosing courage over comfort. "It's not too late, Officer Chen. It's never too late to tell the truth." By the time he hung up, it was fully dark outside. But for the first time in days, Eric felt like maybe, just maybe, the darkness was beginning to retreat. Tomorrow would bring the reckoning. Tomorrow would bring the raid, the story the beginning of real accountability. But tonight in Sarah's office, with evidence boxes stacked like promises of justice, Eric allowed himself to believe that change was actually possible. The storm was here, and Birmingham was about to find out what it meant when someone finally refused to be silenced. Dawn broke over Birmingham at 5:47 a.m., the sky bleeding orange and purple like a bruise. Eric had been awake for 2 hours already, watching the sunrise from his apartment window, coffee going cold in his hand. His phone had been buzzing since midnight, with messages from people he didn't know. People who'd seen the courtroom video, people with their own stories about Darren Cole, about other officers, about a system that had failed them in ways they'd never had the courage to speak about before. Until now. At exactly 6:00 a.m., his phone rang. Agent Pierce. "We're moving. Warrants are being executed at Birmingham PD headquarters, 3 precinct stations, and Sentinel Solutions in Atlanta simultaneously. I wanted you to know." Eric could hear it in her voice, that edge of controlled adrenaline that came before a major operation. He'd felt it himself 100 times before missions overseas. The moment before, everything changed. How many agents? 47 across all locations. We're seizing every server, every hard drive, every piece of paper related to complaint processing from the last 10 years. She paused. Travis Morrison's story goes live in 15 minutes. By the time the department realizes what's happening, it'll be too late to destroy anything. Good hunting, Agent Pierce. Eric. Her voice softened slightly. What you started here, it matters. No matter what happens next, remember that. The line went dead. Eric pulled up the Birmingham Post-Herald website on his laptop and refreshed it every 30 seconds. At 6:14 a.m., the homepage changed. The headline was perfect in its simplicity. Hidden by design, how Birmingham police systematically erased thousands of misconduct complaints. Below it, Travis Morrison's byline. And below that, a subheading that made Eric's chest tighten. Exclusive FBI raids multiple locations as federal investigation expands. The story was everything they'd hoped for and more. Travis had woven together Reggie's technical testimony about the Justice Link system, Naomi's notebook entries, the audit log showing Shaw's manual manipulation, and the broader pattern of Sentinel Solutions contracts across 17 cities. He'd included interviews with legal experts calling it one of the most sophisticated evidence destruction schemes in modern American policing. He'd embedded the video of Cole's assault on Eric, contextualized with a timeline of Cole's career and the complaints that had been erased. But what made the story devastating was the human element. Travis had found 7 other people willing to go on record about their experiences with officers whose complaints had been quarantined. A mother whose son had been beaten during a traffic stop. A teacher who'd been illegally searched. A veteran who'd been assaulted while having a PTSD episode. Their faces, their names, their stories no longer erasable, no longer deniable. And there in the center of the story was a photo of Trevor Foster. Smiling young, full of potential. The caption read, "Trevor Foster, 22, died by suicide 4 months after filing a complaint against Officer Darren Cole. His complaint was deleted from Birmingham PD records 18 months later." Eric's phone exploded with calls. He ignored all of them except one. "Did you see it?" Liam's voice was thick with tears. "They put Trevor's picture in there. His name. People are going to know what happened to him." "They're going to know he mattered," Eric said quietly. "That's what we promised him. That's what we delivered." By 7:00 a.m., the story had been picked up by national outlets. CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, NPR, all running versions of it. The hashtag #HatchJusticeForTrevor was trending on Twitter. Outside Birmingham PD headquarters, protesters were already gathering their numbers, swelling by the minute. Sarah called at 7:23. "Turn on Channel 6. Eric switched on his TV to see live footage of federal agents carrying boxes out of police headquarters. The scene was surreal uniformed officers standing aside helplessly as FBI agents systematically dismantled their record-keeping infrastructure. A reporter was doing a live stand-up, her voice barely containing her excitement. This is an unprecedented scene in Birmingham. Federal agents began executing search warrants just after 6 a.m. this morning, and sources tell us this is connected to revelations published this morning by the Birmingham Post-Herald about systematic destruction of police misconduct records. We're seeing agents removing what appears to be computer equipment file boxes and documents. The police chief has declined to comment, but we're told Lieutenant Raymond Shaw, head of internal affairs, was taken in for questioning about an hour ago. The camera panned to show Shaw being led to an FBI vehicle, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. He wasn't in handcuffs, not yet, but the optics were devastating. The man who'd spent years hiding misconduct was now being investigated for it himself. Eric's phone rang again. This time it was Travis speaking so fast he could barely understand him. "Eric, you need to see this. The comments on the story, the tips coming in. We've had 300 emails in the last hour from people saying they filed complaints that disappeared. Not just in Birmingham, people from Atlanta, Montgomery, Mobile cities where Sentinel has contracts. This is exploding. My editor just told me we're running a follow-up tomorrow, and she wants me to lead an investigative team. A team Eric. They're giving me actual resources for this." "That's good, Travis. That's what we wanted." But there's something else. Gerald Marks just released a statement. Sentinel Solutions is denying everything threatening to sue the Post-Herald and the FBI. They're calling our story reckless journalism and claiming their software is industry standard. They're going to fight this hard. Let them fight. We have the truth. At 9 a.m., Eric arrived at the federal courthouse for what Agent Pierce had called an informal preliminary hearing. But what everyone knew was actually the first public airing of the federal case. The building was surrounded by media trucks, protesters, and a heavy police presence. Eric spotted Naomi in civilian clothes looking lost without her uniform. Reggie was there too, flanked by federal marshals for protection. Sarah had her trial face on all business and controlled fury. Inside, they were led to a large conference room rather than a courtroom. Agent Pierce was already there, along with an assistant U.S. attorney named James Crawford, who looked like he lived on coffee and righteous anger. Across the table sat lawyers for the Birmingham Police Department, lawyers for Sentinel Solutions, and one notably empty chair. "Where's Shaw?" Sarah asked. Crawford smiled thinly. "Lieutenant Shaw has been arrested and charged with obstruction of justice, evidence tampering, and conspiracy to violate civil rights. He's currently being processed." The room erupted. The department lawyers were protesting, demanding to know on what grounds, insisting this was political persecution. But Crawford simply slid a document across the table. "These are the audit logs from the Justice Link system. They show Lieutenant Shaw personally reclassified over 400 complaints in the last 3 years alone, including 17 against Officer Darren Cole. We also have testimony from Reginald Walsh, the IT specialist, who maintained the system, describing explicit instructions from Shaw to ensure certain complaints never reached the review stage." Crawford leaned forward. "Gentlemen, your client didn't just hide evidence. He orchestrated a multi-year conspiracy to do so, and he profited from it." One of the lawyers, a silver-haired man who looked like he charged by the syllable, straightened. "Profited? That's an absurd allegation." Sentinel Solutions made quarterly payments to a consulting firm called Shield Advisory Services. Shield Advisory Services is wholly owned by Raymond Shaw's wife. Over the last 4 years, she received $230,000 in consulting fees for work that, as far as we can tell, never actually happened. Crawford's smile was razor sharp. "So, yes, he profited." The room went silent. Eric felt something shift inside him. This was real. This was actually happening. The wall they'd been throwing themselves against was finally cracking. Agent Pierce stood addressing the room. "We're offering immunity to any Birmingham PD officer who comes forward with information about complaint suppression, evidence manipulation, or related misconduct within the next 72 hours. After that window closes, anyone who participated in these activities will be considered a co-conspirator." The department lawyers were conferring frantically. One of them stood. "This is a witch hunt. You're trying to turn officers against each other based on the testimony of a disgruntled IT worker and a suspended sergeant with an axe to grind, and a decorated Navy SEAL who was assaulted in open court," Sarah cut in. "And a dead young man whose complaint you deleted, and 17 cities' worth of complaints your company's software mysteriously made disappear. This isn't a witch hunt. This is accountability finally catching up with you." Crawford pulled out another document. "We're also charging Darren Cole with deprivation of rights under color of law for the Marcus Webb assault, as well as assault on a federal witness. Mr. Kane was providing testimony in a case that's now part of a federal civil rights investigation, which makes his assault a federal crime." The Sentinel lawyers were standing now too. "Our client has no criminal liability. We provided software in good faith. Your client provided software specifically designed to hide complaints, marketed it to departments with known corruption issues, and took payments from a department official to ensure the software worked as intended." Pierce's voice was ice. "We have emails, Mr. Hastings. Emails between Gerald Marks and Raymond Shaw discussing how to optimize the quarantine protocols and reduce noise in the complaint data. Your client knew exactly what he was selling and who he was selling it to." The meeting devolved into legal threats and procedural arguments after that. But Eric had heard enough. The machinery of justice was finally grinding into motion. Slow perhaps, imperfect certainly, but moving. He slipped out of the conference room and found himself in the hallway, leaning against the wall, finally allowing himself to breathe. Eric Kane. He looked up to see a black woman in her 60s, dressed in a church suit and carrying herself with the kind of dignity that came from surviving things that should have broken her. "Yes, ma'am. My name is Dorothy Foster, Liam's grandmother, Trevor's grandmother." Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I wanted to thank you for giving my grandson's death meaning, for making them say his name." Eric took her hand, finding no words adequate for the moment. "Trevor was my heart," she continued. "Gentle boy, smart, going to be a teacher, you know. He loved kids. After that cop hurt him, something broke inside. He stopped sleeping, stopped eating right, just faded away until there was nothing left but pain." She squeezed Eric's hand. "His mama and daddy, they couldn't bear to fight. Thought it would just bring more pain digging it all up. But Liam, my baby grandson, he knew. He knew Trevor deserved justice, even if it came too late to save him. I'm so sorry for your loss, Mrs. Foster. Don't be sorry, baby. Be angry. Stay angry until every one of them pays." Her voice hardened. "That Lieutenant Shaw, that Officer Cole, they took my grandson from me, took his future, his children who'll never be born, his students who'll never be taught. They took all of that, and they thought it didn't matter because he was just another black boy, and who's going to fight for him?" She pulled Eric down slightly and kissed his forehead. "You did. You fought for him, and now the whole world knows his name." She walked away before Eric could respond, leaving him standing in the hallway with tears burning in his eyes. The hearing reconvened at 2:00 p.m. this time, in an actual courtroom, with a federal magistrate judge presiding. The media gallery was packed. Eric sat in the front row between Sarah and Naomi, watching as Darren Cole was brought in wearing an orange jumpsuit, his wrists shackled. Cole looked diminished. The swagger was completely gone now, replaced by something that might have been genuine fear. His attorney was arguing for bail, citing his years of service, his ties to the community, his lack of flight risk. The prosecutor stood to respond, and Eric recognized him from the morning session. Assistant U.S. Attorney Crawford had changed into a fresh suit and looked ready for war. "Your Honor, the defendant is charged with felony assault under color of law assault on a federal witness and conspiracy to obstruct justice. But those charges only scratch the surface of Officer Cole's criminal conduct. We have documentation showing that over his 16-year career, he generated 147 complaints from citizens. 147 separate allegations of excessive force, illegal searches, verbal abuse, and intimidation. All but 7 were systematically hidden by the very conspiracy we're now prosecuting. Crawford pulled out a folder. Among those hidden complaints are 3 allegations of sexual assault during traffic stops, 4 allegations of planting evidence, and at least 12 allegations of assault that resulted in hospitalization. The defendant didn't just abuse his authority occasionally. He weaponized it systematically, knowing that the system was designed to protect him. The courtroom stirred. Cole's face had gone ashen. Furthermore, Your Honor, we have testimony that will show Officer Cole was aware his complaints were being hidden. He participated in the conspiracy by providing false reports, intimidating witnesses, and in at least 3 cases directly threatening people who tried to file complaints against him. Crawford looked directly at Cole. This is not a good cop who made a mistake. This is a predator who used his badge as a hunting license. The judge, a stern woman named Margaret Thornton, studied the documents in front of her. Mr. Cole, do you understand the charges against you? Cole nodded mutely. I need to hear you speak, Mr. Cole. Yes, Your Honor. His voice was barely a whisper. The court finds that the defendant poses a significant flight risk given the severity of the charges and a danger to the community based on his documented history. Bail is denied. The defendant will remain in federal custody pending trial. The gavel came down and Cole was led away. As he passed Eric's row, their eyes met for just a second. Eric saw no defiance there now, just the hollow realization that the protection was gone, the system had failed, and consequences were finally real. Outside the courthouse, the scene was chaos. Protesters chanted, "No more cover-ups," and "Justice for Trevor," while counter-protesters held signs supporting police. News cameras captured it all, reporters doing live shots with the courthouse as their backdrop. Eric was immediately surrounded by microphones and cameras. Mr. Kane, how does it feel to see Officer Cole denied bail? Do you think justice is being served? What's your response to people who say this is an attack on law enforcement? Eric held up a hand, and the crowd quieted slightly. I have a statement, he said clearly. What happened to me in that courtroom was wrong. What happened to Marcus Webb was wrong. What happened to Trevor Foster was unforgivable. But none of those things would matter. None of those wrongs would be addressed if we didn't have a system capable of recognizing wrong and correcting it. He paused, making sure every camera could see him. This isn't about attacking police. This is about demanding that police be accountable to the same laws they enforce. Officer Cole didn't just kick me. He kicked the entire concept of justice. He looked at a witness stand, a place where truth is supposed to be sacred, and he decided his ego mattered more than the law. That contempt for accountability, that belief that the badge makes him untouchable, that's what we're fighting. A reporter shouted, "Do you think the system can change?" I think the system is changing right now, because of Sergeant Naomi Price, who documented misconduct even when she knew it would cost her career. Because of Reginald Walsh, who had the courage to expose how his technical skills were being used to hide the truth. Because of Travis Morrison, who reported the story when other journalists looked away. Because of Liam Foster, who loved his brother enough to make sure his death wasn't meaningless. Eric's voice strengthened. The system changes when good people decide that comfort matters less than conscience. When silence becomes more painful than speaking up. When we stop asking, "What can one person do?" and start asking, "What will I do?" Another reporter. "What do you want to see happen next?" Eric thought about Dorothy Foster's words, about Trevor's unfulfilled future, about the 17 cities with Sentinel contracts and the 40,000 complaints that had been disappeared. I want every complaint restored, every victim contacted, every officer who participated in hiding misconduct held accountable. I want the Justice Link system investigated everywhere it's been deployed. I want Gerald Marks to explain in court why he designed software specifically to help corrupt cops escape justice. He paused. And I want every young black man in Birmingham to be able to drive home from school without fear that a traffic stop might end their life. The crowd erupted in applause. Eric turned away from the cameras and found Liam standing at the edge of the crowd, tears streaming down his face, holding a photo of Trevor. Eric walked over and put his hand on the young man's shoulder. "He'd be proud of you," Liam said. "I did this because of him, because of you, because people like Trevor deserve a world where justice means something." That evening, Sarah's office had become mission control for what was rapidly becoming a movement. The phones hadn't stopped ringing. Officer Patricia Chen had come forward, officially bringing 12 other officers with her who were ready to testify about pressure to file false reports, to downgrade complaints, to look the other way. 3 city council members had called, demanding an emergency session to review the police department's oversight. The mayor had gone on television promising full cooperation with federal investigators in a speech that everyone knew was damage control. And most significantly, the FBI's immunity window had triggered a flood of responses. 23 officers from Birmingham PD alone had contacted Agent Pierce's office requesting immunity in exchange for testimony. The blue wall of silence was crumbling in real time. Travis arrived at 8 p.m. with pizza and news. "My editor wants to do a week-long investigative series. She's pulling reporters from other beats. We're going deep on every aspect of this, the contracts, the money trail, the officers who were protected, the victims who were silenced. This is going to be our spotlight moment." "Your spotlight moment was this morning's story," Naomi said. She looked exhausted, but somehow lighter, like she'd been carrying weight for years and had finally set it down. "You changed the narrative before they could control it." "We changed it," Travis corrected. "All of us." Reggie was there too, looking less terrified than he had 48 hours ago. "The FBI has me going through every city where Sentinel has contracts, analyzing their quarantine protocols. Birmingham wasn't unique. Every single installation has the same backdoors, the same automatic deletions, the same audit trails showing manual manipulation." He shook his head in disbelief. "This thing is going to end careers in multiple states." Sarah's assistant knocked on the door. "Ms. Chen, there's someone here to see Eric Kane. She says her name is Michelle Cole." The room went silent. "Darren Cole's wife?" Sarah asked. "She says she has information about the Sentinel Solutions contracts, and she wants to talk to Eric specifically." Eric exchanged glances with Sarah, who nodded slightly. "Send her in, but I'm staying in the room." Michelle Cole was not what Eric expected. She was younger than her husband, maybe late 30s, dressed professionally and carrying herself with the rigid posture of someone holding themselves together through sheer will. Her eyes were red from crying, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "Mr. Kane, I want to make something very clear. I'm not here to defend my husband. What he did to you, to Marcus Webb, to all those other people, there's no defense for that." She sat down without being invited, her hands gripping her purse. "I'm here because I have documents that might help your case against Lieutenant Shaw and Sentinel Solutions." "What kind of documents?" Sarah asked carefully. "My husband kept files at home. I never knew what they were. He always said they were just work stuff, told me not to worry about them. But after he was arrested, I looked." She pulled a flash drive from her purse. "There are emails on here between Shaw, my husband, and Gerald Marks. They go back 4 years. They talk about complaint suppression like it's a business model. They reference specific cases where they buried evidence. They even joke about it." She pushed the flash drive across the table, her hand shaking. "There's also financial records. Payments from Sentinel to Shaw's wife's company, like you already found. But there's more payments to a dozen other officers across multiple departments. They called it consultation fees, but the emails make it clear it was hush money. My husband got $15,000 over 3 years for testing and feedback on Justice Link implementation." Her voice broke. He was getting paid to help them hide his own misconduct. Eric stared at the flash drive like it might explode. "Mrs. Cole, why are you giving this to us?" Michelle looked at him with hollow eyes. "Because 3 months ago my husband came home drunk and told me he'd handled a problem. Bragged about intimidating some kid who'd tried to file a complaint. Said the kid looked so scared he'd probably never talk to a cop again. She wiped her eyes. It was Marcus Webb. My husband came home and bragged about terrorizing a 17-year-old boy, and I didn't do anything. I told myself it was just the job, that he was under stress. I made excuses. The room was absolutely silent. Then I watched that video of him kicking you in court. Watched him lose control like that, and I realized that's who he really is. Not the man I married, if that man ever existed. But this version, the one who hurts people and feels nothing. She stood abruptly. I'm divorcing him. I'm taking my daughter and we're leaving Birmingham. But first I'm giving you everything that might help put him away, and everyone like him. Sarah reached for the flash drive. Mrs. Cole, this could be crucial evidence, but you should know that providing it could make you a witness, could put you in danger. I'm already in danger. My husband's victims have every right to hate me for staying silent. My conscience is killing me for all the times I suspected and did nothing. Being a witness. That's the least I can do. She turned to Eric. I can't undo what he did to you or Marcus or anyone else. But maybe this helps. Maybe this makes one thing right. She left before anyone could respond, the door closing softly behind her. Travis grabbed the flash drive and plugged it into his laptop. His eyes widened as he scrolled through the files. Holy shit, this is everything. Email chains discussing problematic complaints, spreadsheets tracking which officers were protected, financial records showing the payment scheme. He looked up, his face flushed. This isn't just evidence. This is a confession. They documented their own conspiracy. Agent Pierce arrived 20 minutes later with a team of forensic analysts. They secured the flash drive, made multiple copies, and began the process of authenticating every document. By midnight, they'd confirmed that the emails were genuine, the financial records matched payments in Sentinel's accounts, and the spreadsheets correlated perfectly with complaints that had been quarantined and deleted. We can charge Shaw with racketeering now, Pierce said, exhaustion and triumph mixing in her voice. And we can add Marks as a co-conspirator. This evidence shows deliberate, systematic corruption for profit. It's RICO. It's wire fraud. It's about 6 other federal crimes. Crawford was already on his phone with the U.S. attorney, his voice rising with excitement as he described what they'd found. Eric stepped outside Sarah's office, needing air, needing space to process what was happening. The city lights spread out below Birmingham at night, unaware that its police department was being systematically dismantled and rebuilt from the ground up. His phone rang. Unknown number. He was getting used to those. Mr. Kane. An older man's voice, gravelly with age. My name is Reggie Davis. I was a Birmingham police officer from 1972 to 1998. I'm calling because I want you to know that what you're doing, what you're exposing, it's not new. We tried in the 80s. We tried in the 90s. Every time the system swallowed it up and nothing changed. Eric's heart sank. Then why are you calling? Because this time feels different. This time you've got federal involvement before they can contain it. You've got media coverage they can't control. You've got evidence they can't delete. The old man's voice grew stronger. This time maybe it sticks, and if it does, you'll have done what we couldn't. You'll have broken something that's been broken in this city for 50 years. I hope you're right, sir. I know I'm right, because I've seen what happens when good people give up, and I'm watching what happens when good people don't. Keep fighting, son. Some of us old-timers are watching and praying you make it. The line went dead. Eric stood there in the darkness, letting the weight of those words settle over him. 50 years of broken systems. 50 years of people trying and failing to fix them. And now, maybe finally a chance to actually succeed. He thought about the 6 words he'd spoken in court after Cole kicked him. You don't know who I am. At the time, he'd meant them as a warning, but now he understood they were something else. They were a promise. A promise that this time silence wouldn't win. This time the truth would have teeth. This time the system would bend or it would break, but it would not stay the same. Inside, he could hear Travis typing furiously. Sarah on the phone with federal prosecutors, Naomi and Reggie going through files and cross-referencing complaints. The machinery of justice finally grinding in the right direction. Eric walked back inside, ready for whatever came next. The war wasn't over. But for the first time, he believed they could win it. 3 weeks later, the federal courthouse looked like a fortress. Security had been tripled after threats against witnesses. Protesters lined both sides of the street with competing signs, and satellite trucks from every major network created a metal forest along the curb. Inside Courtroom 4A, the preliminary hearing for United States v. Raymond Shaw and Gerald Marks was about to begin, and everyone knew this wasn't just a legal proceeding. It was a reckoning. Eric sat in the witness gallery watching people file in. Naomi was there, looking somehow both vulnerable and fierce without her uniform. Reggie sat between two federal marshals, still jumpy despite the protection. Travis had his press credentials prominently displayed, notepad ready, and in the back row, wearing a suit that looked borrowed and uncomfortable, sat Liam Foster, with his grandmother Dorothy on one side, and Marcus Webb with his mother Diane on the other. The gallery reserved for victims had filled quickly. 17 people Eric didn't recognize, all holding folders and photos, all with stories about complaints that had vanished. One woman clutched a picture of a young man in military uniform. Another held hands with a teenager who kept his eyes down, unwilling to look at the front of the courtroom where defense attorneys were assembling their arguments. Raymond Shaw was brought in first, wearing a suit instead of his uniform, his lawyer whispering urgently in his ear. He looked older than he had 3 weeks ago, the weight of exposure aging him in real time. But his eyes still held that calculating hardness, the look of a man who'd survived bureaucratic wars, and believed he could survive this one too. Gerald Marks arrived moments later, all expensive suit and performative outrage. He spoke loudly to his attorneys, making sure reporters could hear him protest about groundless persecution and politically motivated prosecution. But Eric noticed how his hands shook slightly when he opened his briefcase. Judge Margaret Thornton entered, and the room rose. She'd been assigned the case specifically because of her reputation for being unmoved by power, unbothered by pressure, and absolutely committed to following evidence wherever it led. She settled into her chair and surveyed the packed courtroom with the expression of someone about to perform surgery. "We're here for the preliminary hearing in United States versus Raymond Shaw and Gerald Marks. The defendants are charged with conspiracy to obstruct justice, deprivation of civil rights under color of law, wire fraud, and racketeering. This hearing will determine if there's sufficient evidence to proceed to trial." She looked at the prosecution table. "Mr. Crawford, call your first witness." Assistant U.S. Attorney James Crawford stood, and Eric could see the controlled energy radiating from him. This was the kind of case prosecutors dreamed about, the kind that defined careers and changed systems. "The United States calls Reginald Walsh." Reggie walked to the stand like he was approaching a firing squad, but his voice when he took the oath was steady. Crawford led him through the technical testimony, patiently making the complex database architecture understandable for the non-technical audience. "Mr. Walsh, in simple terms, what was the Justice Link system designed to do? On the surface, it was supposed to modernize complaint processing, make everything more efficient and transparent." Reggie's voice grew stronger as he fell into his expertise. "But the actual coding reveals a different purpose. The system was designed to automatically flag complaints as potentially unreliable, based on criteria that essentially meant any complaint without video evidence or multiple witnesses would be quarantined." And what happened to quarantined complaints? They went into a review queue that was deliberately designed to be overwhelming. 12,000 entries with no tools to actually review them efficiently. It was digital purgatory. Reggie pulled out a diagram. Then, after 18 months, automatic deletion protocols kicked in. The complaints weren't destroyed immediately, which would be obvious evidence tampering. They were slowly, bureaucratically erased in a way that looked like routine data management. Crawford displayed emails on the courtroom monitors. "Mr. Walsh, can you identify these communications?" Reggie studied them, his jaw tightening. These are emails between Lieutenant Shaw and Gerald Marks discussing how to optimize the quarantine protocols. In this one from April 2022, Marks asks Shaw which types of complaints are most problematic for the department. Shaw responds with a list: excessive force, illegal search, racial profiling, sexual misconduct. 2 weeks later, there's an email from Marks saying the algorithm has been adjusted to better filter noise in those categories. The courtroom stirred. Judge Thornton leaned forward. "And what does filter noise mean in this context, Mr. Walsh?" "It means automatically flag those specific complaint types for quarantine. Make them disappear without anyone having to manually delete them." Crawford let that sink in before continuing. "Mr. Walsh, the defense has argued that these were good faith attempts to improve data quality. What's your professional opinion?" Data quality improvements don't selectively target specific complaint categories. They don't include payment schemes to officers who provide testing feedback. They don't come with instructions to make review queues deliberately unmanageable. Reggie looked directly at Shaw. This wasn't about data quality. This was about making accountability impossible. The defense attorneys cross-examined aggressively, trying to paint Reggie as a disgruntled employee with an axe to grind, but he held firm. By the time he stepped down, the foundation had been laid. Naomi was called next, and Eric watched her walk to the stand with the bearing of someone who'd finally stopped running from the truth. Crawford treated her gently, respectfully. "Sergeant Price, how long have you been with Birmingham PD?" 22 years. "And during that time, did you file official reports about officer misconduct?" 17 times. Her voice was clear, unwavering. "What happened to those reports?" "All 17 were investigated by Internal Affairs under Lieutenant Shaw's supervision. All 17 were closed as unsubstantiated." Crawford pulled out Naomi's blue notebook, now entered into evidence. "Can you describe this for the court?" "That's my personal documentation of incidents I witnessed or complaints I took from citizens. I started keeping it in 2019 after I noticed a pattern reports I filed would be altered or complaints I logged would disappear from the database." "How many entries are in this notebook, Sergeant Price?" 43. Her eyes moved to Shaw, who was staring at the table. 27 involve Officer Darren Cole. Others involve 14 different officers across the department. Why didn't you report the pattern you were seeing? Naomi's composure cracked slightly. "I tried. In 2020, I requested a meeting with Lieutenant Shaw to discuss inconsistencies in the complaint database. He told me the system was working as designed and that I should focus on my patrol duties rather than administrative issues." She paused. "He also mentioned that officers who created problems for the department often found their careers stalling out. I was up for a promotion at the time." "Did you get the promotion?" "No. 3 months after that meeting, I was passed over in favor of an officer with less experience and a documented history of excessive force complaints." Crawford walked her through specific entries in the notebook, each one more damning than the last. A traffic stop where Cole had searched a vehicle without probable cause. An arrest where an officer had used a racial slur. A complaint from a woman who said she'd been groped during a pat-down. All documented by Naomi, all disappeared from official records. The defense tried to discredit her on cross-examination, suggesting she was bitter about her stalled career, that her notebook was fabricated after the fact. But Crawford had anticipated this. "Sergeant Price, are the entries in your notebook dated?" "Yes. Each one has a date, time, and case number when applicable." "And do those case numbers correspond to actual incidents in Birmingham PD records?" "They do. The incidents exist in the system, but the officer names and complaint details have been removed or altered." Crawford displayed a split screen on the monitors. On one side, Naomi's notebook entry from June 14th, describing Cole's assault on Marcus Webb in detail. On the other side, the official incident report describing it as a routine traffic stop with minimal contact. The contrast was devastating. When Naomi stepped down, Eric caught her eye and nodded. She'd done what she came to do, told the truth and let it stand. The prosecution called 6 more witnesses that day, each adding another piece to the mosaic of systematic corruption. Officer Patricia Chen described pressure to downgrade complaint severity. 2 citizens testified about complaints that vanished. A data forensics expert explained the audit trails showing manual manipulation. But the moment that changed everything came near the end of the day when Crawford called his final witness. The United States calls Eric Kane. Eric walked to the stand, feeling the weight of every eye in the courtroom. He took the oath settled into the chair and waited. Crawford started with basic background establishing Eric's military service, his credentials, his reason for being in Birmingham. Then, he moved to the assault. Mr. Kane, can you describe what happened in Courtroom 7B on September 26th? Eric walked through it methodically. His testimony about Marcus Webb's traffic stop, Cole's approach, the kick, the blood, those 6 words. You said you don't know who I am. What did you mean? I meant that Officer Cole looked at me and saw what he wanted to see. Not my service record, not my testimony, just another person he could intimidate into silence. Eric's voice was calm, and I meant that he had no idea what he'd just started, that the protection he'd relied on was about to fail. Crawford displayed the video of the assault, the courtroom going silent as they watched Cole kick Eric, watched him rise, watched him speak those 6 words with blood on his lip. Mr. Kane, you could have accepted the department's offer of a settlement and apology. Why didn't you? Eric looked at the gallery at Liam and Dorothy Foster, at Marcus Webb and his mother, at the 17 people holding photos of loved ones failed by the system. Because accepting a settlement would have meant accepting that what happened to me was an isolated incident. And I knew it wasn't. He turned to face Shaw directly. I knew there were systems in place designed to make accountability impossible. I knew there were people profiting from keeping those systems broken. And I knew that if someone with my resources and visibility wouldn't fight, then we were asking the most vulnerable people to fight battles alone. Crawford let that statement resonate before asking his final question. Mr. Kane, Officer Cole claimed he pulled over Marcus Webb because Marcus matched a suspect description. Do you know what that description was? Black male, late teens to early 20s, approximately 5'10". And how many people in Birmingham match that description? Tens of thousands. Crawford walked to the defense table and stood directly behind Shaw. Mr. Kane, in your research into complaint patterns, did you find other instances where suspects were stopped for matching descriptions that were impossibly broad? Yes, hundreds of them. In fact, 73% of Officer Cole's traffic stops involved people who allegedly matched suspect descriptions. But when we cross-referenced those stops with actual BOLO alerts and suspect descriptions issued by the department, only 11% actually matched an active alert. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Thornton gavelled for order. What does that suggest to you, Mr. Kane? It suggests that matching a description was a pretext, a way to justify stopping whoever the officer wanted to stop, knowing the complaint would be quarantined if the stop went wrong. Eric leaned forward, his eyes still locked on Shaw. And here's the thing about descriptions, Lieutenant Shaw. Nobody gets shot by a description. Nobody gets beaten by protocol. They get hurt because an officer makes a decision to hurt them, and then the system makes a decision to hide it. Crawford smiled grimly. No further questions. The defense attorney's cross-examination was aggressive but ineffective. He tried to paint Eric as anti-police, tried to suggest his testimony was biased, tried to attack his credibility. But every question just gave Eric another opportunity to lay out the evidence calmly and clearly. When Eric finally stepped down, he could see the shift in the courtroom. The defense attorneys knew they were in trouble. Shaw's confident posture had collapsed. Marks was whispering urgently to his lawyers. Judge Thornton called for a brief recess, but when they reconvened, her ruling was swift and certain. Having heard the testimony and reviewed the evidence presented, the court finds probable cause to believe the defendants engaged in a conspiracy to systematically obstruct justice and deprive citizens of their civil rights. This case will proceed to trial. She looked at Shaw and Marks with obvious disgust. Bail remains denied for Lieutenant Shaw. Mr. Marks, your bail is revoked effective immediately. Remand both defendants to custody. The gavel came down with finality. Shaw's face went white. His attorneys were protesting, but two federal marshals were already approaching. As the handcuffs clicked around his wrists, Shaw looked across the courtroom at Eric with pure hatred. "This isn't over," he said loud enough to be heard. "You think you've won something, but you've just made yourself a target. I know things. I know people. You have no idea." "That's enough, Lieutenant Shaw." Judge Thornton's voice was ice. "Marshal, remove him." As Shaw was led away, still protesting, still threatening, Gerald Marks sat frozen in his chair. The CEO who'd built a company on helping cops escape accountability was now going to face it himself. The courtroom cleared slowly, people filing out in stunned silence. Eric found himself surrounded immediately by reporters, but Sarah ran interference, carving a path to the exit. Outside, the crowd had swelled to hundreds. Protesters chanting for justice, mixed with people simply wanting to witness history. Eric saw signs reading, "Trevor Foster matters," and "No more deleted complaints," and "Blue wall coming down." A makeshift memorial had been set up on the courthouse steps. Photos of people failed by the system, candles, handwritten signs. And in the center, an enlarged photo of Trevor Foster smiling and young and full of potential that had been stolen from him. Dorothy Foster stood before it, one hand on the photo, tears streaming down her weathered face. When she saw Eric, she opened her arms, and he went to her, this woman who'd lost so much, but somehow still had grace enough to embrace him. "They said his name," she whispered. "In a federal courtroom, they said my baby's name, and people listened. That's all I ever wanted, just for someone to listen." Liam was there too, and Marcus and Diane Webb, and Officer Patricia Chen, with a dozen other cops who'd found the courage to come forward. They formed a circle around the memorial, this unlikely coalition of people who'd decided that silence cost too much. Travis pushed through the crowd, his face flushed with excitement. "Eric, the story's everywhere. Every major outlet is running it. Congressional hearings are being scheduled to investigate Sentinel Solutions contracts in other cities. The Alabama AG just announced a statewide review of police complaint systems. This is bigger than Birmingham now. This is everywhere." But before Eric could respond, a woman approached the memorial carrying a photo. She was young, maybe mid-20s, and her hands were shaking. "My name is Angela Reeves," she said, her voice barely audible. "Marcus Reeves was my father, the officer who Travis said was deleted from the department records." She placed the photo next to Trevor's. "He died 2 years ago. Heart attack, they said. But I always wondered if it was stress from what happened to his career, from being erased like he never existed." She looked at Eric. "Thank you for making them remember, for proving he was real." More people began adding photos to the memorial. A son, a brother, a friend. Each one representing a complaint that had been deleted, a voice that had been silenced, a person the system had tried to erase. By sunset, the memorial stretched 20 feet across the courthouse steps, a visual representation of everything that had been hidden. The trial took 6 weeks. Crawford and his team methodically dismantled every defense argument, every attempt to justify the unjustifiable. The evidence from Michelle Cole's flash drive proved devastating, showing the conspiracy in the participants' own words. The audit logs showed the pattern too clearly to deny. And witness after witness, officers, citizens, IT specialists, data experts, all testified to the same truth. The system had been broken on purpose by people who profited from keeping it broken. Darren Cole took a plea deal in week 3, agreeing to testify against Shaw and Marks in exchange for a reduced sentence. Watching him on the stand, Eric felt no satisfaction, just a weary sadness that it had taken this much pain to get to this point. Lieutenant Shaw told me not to worry about complaints. Cole testified, his voice flat. Said the new system would handle them. Said if I just filed my reports a certain way, used certain language, anything problematic would get filtered out. He looked at the jury. I stopped even thinking about it. Just did what I wanted on the street because I knew nothing would stick. The defense tried to salvage their case by arguing that Shaw and Marks had believed they were improving efficiency, that any misconduct was unintentional. But the emails demolished that argument. Jokes about problem citizens getting filtered out. Discussions about which complaint categories to optimize away. Spreadsheets tracking payments to officers who helped test the system. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts for both defendants. The sentencing hearing 3 weeks later was packed again. Judge Thornton listened to victim impact statements for 2 full days. Eric was one of 17 people who spoke, but his statement was brief. I was kicked in a courtroom and got back up with bruised ribs and a split lip. I healed in 2 weeks, but the people whose complaints were deleted, whose voices were erased, whose trauma was denied, they didn't heal. Some of them never will. Trevor Foster never got the chance. Eric looked at Shaw in his orange jumpsuit, diminished and defeated. These defendants didn't just break laws, they broke trust. They broke the promise that in America, everyone gets to be heard. That justice isn't just for people with power. Judge Thornton sentenced Raymond Shaw to 12 years in federal prison. Gerald Marks got 8 years and was ordered to disband Sentinel Solutions, with all contracts voided and all source code for Justice Link turned over to an independent review board. But Eric knew the real victory wasn't the prison time. It was what happened next. The Birmingham City Council, under intense public pressure, voted unanimously to create an independent citizen oversight center. Not a reform board that would recommend changes nobody implemented. Not a commission that would write reports nobody read. An actual independent agency with subpoena power, civilian investigators, and the authority to discipline officers directly. Every complaint filed would go directly to the oversight center, not through the police department's internal affairs. Every citizen would have the right to access their own records to know exactly what happened to their complaint and why. And every year, a public audit would track patterns, identify problem officers, and publish findings that couldn't be hidden or spun. Naomi Price was offered the position of Director of Training for the new center. She accepted on one condition, that she be allowed to personally train every new cadet class on proper complaint documentation and the danger of institutional silence. Eric attended the first training session standing in the back of the room as Naomi addressed 40 nervous recruits. I want you to understand something, she told them, her voice carrying the authority of hard-earned wisdom. Every report you file matters. Every complaint you take seriously could save a life. And every time you stay silent about misconduct, you become part of the problem. She held up her blue notebook, now encased in glass like a sacred text. I kept this for 3 years because I knew the system was broken, but I didn't know how to fix it. You don't have that excuse anymore. The system is fixed. Now it's on you to use it. One young recruit raised her hand. Sergeant Price, what if we see something wrong, but we're scared of retaliation? Then you remember Trevor Foster. You remember Marcus Webb. You remember every person who suffered because someone chose comfort over courage. And you decide which side of that equation you want to be on. Naomi's eyes swept the room. Because here's the truth they don't tell you in the academy. The badge doesn't make you a hero. Your choices do. And the most important choice you'll make is whether to be the kind of cop who protects people or the kind who protects other cops. 3 months after the sentencing, Eric stood at Oak Hill Cemetery on a cold November morning. A small crowd had gathered around a newly restored gravestone. The old marker had been simple, generic. The new one was granite, substantial, engraved with care. Trevor, Michael Foster, beloved son, brother, friend. His voice was silenced, but his truth speaks forever. Dorothy Foster placed flowers at the base, her hands steady now, her grief transformed into something like peace. He would have loved this, she said softly. Not the attention, not the fame, but knowing that he mattered, that his life and his death meant something. Liam stood beside her, no longer the scared college kid, but someone who'd found his purpose in truth-telling. He'd been offered a job at the Post-Herald, working on Travis's investigative team. His first assignment was tracking the implementation of oversight reforms in the 17 cities where Sentinel had operated. "I'm writing a book," Liam told Eric as they walked back to their cars. "About Trevor, about the system, about everything that happened. I want people to understand how we got here and how we can make sure it never happens again." "What are you calling it?" "The Blue Notebook." After Sergeant Price's documentation. Because that's what this was really about. Right? Making sure everything gets documented, making sure nothing can be erased. Eric smiled. Trevor would like that. The memorial at the courthouse had become permanent. The city council voted to create Trevor Foster Memorial Plaza, a public space dedicated to transparency and accountability. The photos that had been laid out on those first chaotic days were now part of an art installation designed by a local artist. Each face represented a story, a complaint, a moment when the system had failed, but would no longer be forgotten. Eric visited it one last time before leaving Birmingham. He'd stayed longer than he intended, seeing the reforms through their critical early stages. But it was time to go. This was Birmingham's story now. Birmingham's reform, Birmingham's future to build. He was surprised to find Sarah Chen there, standing in front of the memorial wall. "I had a feeling you'd come here," she said. "You're leaving, aren't you?" "Yeah, tomorrow morning." "The mayor's office called me. They want to create a reform council, put you on it as an advisor. Paid position, real authority." Eric shook his head. "That's not what this needs." "I told them you'd say that." Sarah smiled slightly. "What did you tell them when they asked you directly?" "I told them we don't need more symbols. We need the silence to speak. The Oversight Center works because it's run by citizens, not celebrities. By Naomi and people like her who know the system from the inside. My job was to break down the door. It's their job to build something better in the empty space." Sarah studied him. "You know what you did here, right? You changed a city. Probably changed policing in a dozen states. That FBI investigation is expanding to 30 cities now. You started something." "We started something, all of us. And it'll only mean something if we don't make it about personalities or heroes or one good guy fighting the system. It has to be about the system changing because people demanded it change. Still, you're allowed to take credit." Eric looked at the photos on the memorial wall. Trevor's face, young and hopeful. Angela's father, Marcus, looking proud in his police uniform. A dozen other faces representing lives interrupted, potential stolen justice delayed. The only credit that matters is if this lasts. If 5 years from now, 10 years from now, the Oversight Center is still working. If cops are still being held accountable. If another Trevor Foster gets pulled over and goes home safe because an officer knows someone's actually watching. He turned to Sarah. "That's the credit I want. Not a plaque or a position or my name on something. Just the quiet knowledge that the next person who needs justice might actually get it." As the sun set over Birmingham, Eric walked through the downtown streets one final time. The city looked different somehow. Or maybe he was different. Or maybe truth just changed the way light hit things. He passed the courthouse where Cole had kicked him and everything had started. Past the police headquarters where FBI agents had carried out boxes of evidence. Past the Post-Herald building where Travis was probably still working another story, another investigation, another truth being dragged into the light. His phone buzzed. A text from Naomi. "First month report from the Oversight Center. 0 complaints quarantined. 100% reviewed. 17 investigations opened. It's working, Eric. It's actually working." Another text from Liam. "Just interviewed 3 more officers willing to go on record about past misconduct. The silence is breaking. Thank you for showing us it was possible." And one from an unknown number. "My name is David Chen, Officer Patricia Chen's son. My mom told me what you did, How you made it safe for good cops to speak up. I'm starting at the academy next month. Because of people like you and my mom, I think I can be the kind of cop this city deserves. Thank you." Eric stood on a bridge overlooking the city lights coming on as darkness fell, and felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Not victory exactly, not closure. Something quieter than that. Something like hope mixed with exhaustion, mixed with the bone-deep satisfaction of a mission completed. His phone rang one more time. Dorothy Foster. "Eric, baby. I just wanted to tell you they're adding something to Trevor's memorial stone tomorrow. A quote. They asked me what I wanted it to say, and I thought of you. Of those 6 words. What did you choose? You don't know who I am, but now you will. Because that's what this was all about, wasn't it? Making sure boys like my Trevor can't be erased. Making sure everyone knows who they were, what they meant, why they mattered." Eric felt his throat tighten. "That's perfect, Mrs. Foster. You come back and visit sometime. Birmingham's going to remember you, whether you want us to or not." After they hung up, Eric stood on that bridge for another hour, watching the city transform in the darkness. Somewhere down there, Naomi was training tomorrow's officers to be better than yesterday's. Somewhere Liam was writing truth into permanence. Somewhere Marcus Webb was sleeping without nightmares for the first time in months. And somewhere Trevor Foster's name was carved in stone that would outlast them all. Eric had arrived in Birmingham as a witness to one traffic stop, one assault, one moment of injustice. He was leaving having helped dismantle a system that had hidden thousands of such moments. The work wasn't finished. It would never truly be finished. But it was started in a way that mattered, in a way that would last. He thought about all of the times in his military career when he'd completed a mission and moved on, leaving others to hold the ground he'd helped take. This felt the same. Birmingham was holding its ground now. The oversight center, the reformed complaint system, the officers finding courage to speak up, the citizens finding their voices heard, all of it would continue without him. That was how it should be. Eric walked back to his car as the city lights spread out like promises below. Tomorrow, he'd drive away from Birmingham, but he'd leave behind something more permanent than monuments. He'd leave behind a city that had learned finally painfully, but genuinely, how to listen. And in the end, that was the only legacy that mattered. Not revenge, not punishment, not even justice in its purest form. Just the simple revolutionary act of hearing someone when they said, "This hurt me," and believing them enough to make it stop. The blue notebook had done its job. The deleted complaints had been restored. The silenced voices had been heard. And a city had learned that accountability wasn't the enemy of safety. It was the foundation. Eric started his car and pulled away from the curb, Birmingham's lights fading in his rearview mirror. But he could still see them glowing like small fires in the darkness, each one a promise that this time the change would last. Because they'd built it right. Not on one person or one moment, but on systems and citizens and the hard, unglamorous work of showing up every day to make sure justice meant something. He'd been wrong about those 6 words he'd spoken after Cole kicked him. "You don't know who I am." It wasn't about him at all. It was about all of them. Every person who'd chosen courage over comfort, every voice that refused to be silenced, every name that wouldn't be erased. Birmingham knew who they were now, and it would never forget.